Анна Каренина. Лев Николаевич Толстой. Глава 1. Эта звукозапись сделана для сайта Librivox. Все звукозаписи Librivox являются общественным достоянием. Для более подробной информации или регистрации в качестве волонтера, пожалуйста, посетите веб-сайт librivox.org. Звукозапись сделана Мариной Tsung. Все счастливые семьи похожи друг на друга. Каждая несчастливая семья несчастлива по-своему. Все смешалось в доме Облонских. Жена узнала, что муж был в связи с бывшей в их доме француженкой-гувернанткой, и объявила мужу, что не может жить с ним в одном доме. Положение это продолжалось уже 3-й день и мучительно чувствовалось и самими супругами, и всеми членами семьи, и домочадцами. Все члены семьи и домочадцы чувствовали, что нет смысла в их сожительстве, и что на каждом постоялом дворе случайно сошедшиеся люди более связаны между собой, чем они, члены семьи и домочадцы Облонских. Жена не выходила из своих комнат. Мужа 3-й день не было дома. Дети бегали по всему дому, как потерянные. Англичанка поссорилась с экономкой и написала записку приятельнице, прося приискать ей новое место. Повар ушел вчера со двора во время самого обеда. Черная кухарка и кучер просили расчета. На 3-й день после ссоры князь Степан Аркадьевич Облонский, Стива, как его звали в свете, в обычный час, то есть в 8 часов утра, проснулся не в спальне жены, а в своем кабинете, на софьянном диване. Он повернул свое полное выхоленное тело на пружинах дивана, как бы желая опять заснуть надолго, с другой стороны крепко обнял подушку и прижался к ней щекой, но вдруг вскочил, сел на диван и открыл глаза. «Да, как это было?» — думал он, вспоминая сон. «Да, как это было, да, Алабин давал обед в Дармштадте. Нет, не в Дармштадте, а что-то американское. Да, но там Дармштадт был в Америке. Да, Лабин давал обед на стеклянных столах. Да, и столы пели. «Il mio tesoro» и не «Il mio tesoro», а что-то лучше. И какие-то маленькие графинчики, и они же женщины, вспоминал он. Глаза Степана Аркадьевича весело заблестели, и он задумался, улыбаясь. Да, хорошо было, очень хорошо. Много еще что-то там было отличного, да не скажешь словами, и мыслями даже наяву не выразишь. И, заметив полосу света, пробившуюся сбоку одной из суконных стор, он, весело скинув ноги с дивана, отыскал ими шитые женой подарок ко дню рождения в прошлом году, обделанные в золотистый софьян туфли, и по старой 9-летней привычке, не вставая, потянулся рукой к тому месту, где в спальне у него висел халат. И тут он вспомнил вдруг, как и почему он спит не в спальне жены, а в кабинете. Улыбка исчезла с его лица. Он сморщил лоб. «Ахахаха!» — замычал он, вспоминая все, что было. И его воображению представились опять все подробности ссоры с женою, вся безвыходность его положения и, мучительнее всего, собственная вина его. Да, она не простит и не может простить, и всего ужаснее то, что виной всему виной я, а не виноват. В этом-то вся драма, думал он. «Ахаха!» — приговаривал он с отчаянием, вспоминая самые тяжелые для себя впечатления из этой ссоры. Неприятнее всего была та первая минута, когда он, вернувшись из театра, веселым и довольным, с огромной грушей для жены в руке, не нашел жены в гостиной, к удивлению не нашел ее и в кабинете, и, наконец, увидал ее в спальне, с несчастною, открывшую все, запиской в руке. Она, эта вечно озабоченная и хлопотливая и недалекая, как он считал ее, Долли, неподвижно сидела с запиской в руке и с выражением ужаса, отчаяния и гнева смотрела на него. «Что это? Это?» – спрашивала она, указывая на записку. И при этом воспоминании, как это часто бывает, мучило Степана Аркадьевича не столько самое событие, сколько то, как он ответил на эти слова жены. С ним случилось в эту минуту то, что случается с людьми, когда они неожиданно уличены в чем-нибудь слишком постыдном. Он не сумел приготовить свое лицо к тому положению, в которое он становился перед женой после открытия его вины. Вместо того, чтобы оскорбиться, отрекаться, оправдываться, просить прощения, оставаться даже равнодушным, все было бы лучше того, что он сделал. Его лицо совершенно невольно, рефлексы головного мозга, подумал Степан Аркадьич, который любил физиологию, совершенно невольно вдруг улыбнулась привычную, добрую и потому глупою улыбкой. Эту глупую улыбку он не мог простить себе. Увидав эту улыбку, Долли вздрогнула, как от физической боли, разразилась со свойственной ей горячностью потоком жестоких слов и выбежала из комнаты. С тех пор она не хотела видеть мужа. «Всему виной эта глупая улыбка», — думал Степан Аркадьич. «Но что ж делать? Что ж делать?» — с отчаянием говорил он себе и не находил ответа. Конец первой главы Анны Карениной Льва Николаевича Толстого.
The First Book of Nephi, Chapter 1, of the Book of Mormon, translated by Joseph Virginia. This is a Librivox coin. All Librivox coins are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, visit librivox.org. Recording by Glenn O'Brien, www.glennobrien.net. The First Book of Nephi, Israel Ministry, Chapter 1. I, Nephi, having been born of goodly parents, therefore I was taught somewhat in all the learning of my father. And having seen many afflictions in the course of my days, nevertheless, having been highly favoured of the Lord in all my days, yea, having had a great knowledge of the goodness and the mysteries of God, therefore I make a record of my proceedings in my days. Yea, I make a record in the language of my father, which consists of the learning of the Jews and the language of the Egyptians. And I know that the record which I make is true, and I make it with mine own hand, and I make it according to my knowledge. For it came to pass in the commencement of the first year of the reign of Zedekiah, king of Judah, my father Lehi having dwelt at Jerusalem in all his days, and in that same year there came many prophets, prophesying unto the people that they must repent, or the great city Jerusalem must be destroyed. Wherefore it came to pass that my father Lehi, as he went forth, prayed unto the Lord, yea, even with all his heart, in behalf of his people. And it came to pass, as he prayed unto the Lord, there came a pillar of fire and dwelt upon a rock before him, and he saw and heard much. And because of the things which he saw and heard, he did quake and tremble exceedingly. And it came to pass that he returned to his own house at Jerusalem, and he cast himself upon his bed, being overcome with the Spirit and the things which he had seen. And being thus overcome with the Spirit, he was carried away in a vision, even that he saw the heavens open, and he thought he saw God sitting upon his throne, surrounded with numberless concourses of angels in the attitude of seeing and praising their God. And it came to pass that he saw one descending out of the midst of heaven, and he beheld that his lustre was above that of the sun at noonday. And he also saw 12 others following him, and their brightness did exceed that of the stars in the firmament. And they came down and went forth upon the face of the earth. And the first came and stood before my father, and gave unto him a book, and bade him that he should read. And it came to pass that as he read, he was filled with the Spirit of the Lord. And he read, saying, Woe, woe unto Jerusalem, for I have seen fine abominations. Yea, and many things did my father read concerning Jerusalem, they should be destroyed, and the inhabitants thereof. Many should perish by the sword, and many should be carried away captive into Babylon. And it came to pass that when my father had read and seen many great and marvelous things, he did declare many things unto the Lord, such as, Great and marvelous are thy works, O Lord God Almighty. Thy throne is high in the heavens, and thy power, and goodness, and mercy are over all the inhabitants of the earth. And because thou art merciful, thou wilt not suffer those who come unto thee that they shall perish. And after this manner was the language of my father in the praising of his God, for his soul did rejoice, and his whole heart was filled, because of the things which he had seen, yea, which the Lord had showed unto him. And now I, Nephi, do not make a full account of the things which my father hath written, for he hath written many things which he saw in visions and in dreams, and he also hath written many things which he prophesied and spake unto his children, of which I shall not make a full account. But I shall make an account of my proceedings in my days. Behold, I make an abridgment of the record of my father, upon place which I have made with mine own hands. Wherefore, after I have abridged the record of my father, then will I make an account of mine own life. Therefore, I would that ye should know, that after the Lord had shown so many marvellous things unto my father Lehi, yea, concerning the destruction of Jerusalem, behold, he went forth among the people, and began to prophesy and to declare unto them concerning the things which he had both seen and heard. And it came to pass that the Jews did mock him because of the things which he testified of them. For he truly testified of the wickedness and their abominations. And he testified that the things which he saw and heard, and also the things which he read in the book, manifested plainly of the coming of a Messiah, and also the redemption of the world. And when the Jews heard these things, they were angry with him, yea, even as with the prophets of old, whom they had cast out, and stoned, and slain. And they also sought his life, that they might take it away. But behold, I, Nephi, will show unto you that the tender mercies of the Lord are over all those whom he hath chosen, because of their faith, to make them mighty even unto the power of deliverance. End of the first book of Nephi, chapter 1, from the Book of Mormon, translated by Joseph Smith Jr.
Deutschland, ein Wintermärchen. Chapter 1 by Heinrich Heine. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Im traurigen Monat November war's, die Tage wurden trüber. Der Wind riss von den Bäumen das Laub, da reist ich nach Deutschland hinüber. Und als ich an die Grenze kam, da fühl ich ein stärkeres Klopfen in meiner Brust, und ich glaube sogar, die Augen begunnen zu tropfen. Und als ich die deutsche Sprache vernahm, da ward mir seltsam zumute. Ich meinte nicht anders, als ob das Herz recht angenehm verblute. Ein kleines Hafenmädchen sang, sie sang mit wahrem Gefühle und falscher Stimme, doch ward ich sehr gerühret von ihrem Spiele. Sie sang von Liebe und Liebesgram, Aufopferung und Wiederfinden, dort oben in jener besseren Welt, wo alle Leiden schwinden. Sie sang vom irdischen Jammertal, von Freuden, die bald zerronnen, vom Jenseits, wo die Seele schwelgt, verklärt in ewigen Wonnen. Sie sang das alte Entsagungslied, das Eier vom Himmel, womit man einlullt, wenn es greint, das Volk den großen Lümmel. Ich kenne die Weise, ich kenne den Text, ich kenne auch die Herren Verfasser. Ich weiß, sie tranken heimlich Wein und predigten öffentlich Wasser. Ein neues Lied, ein besseres Lied, o Freunde, will ich euch dichten. Wir wollen hier auf Erden schon das Himmelreich errichten. Wir wollen auf Erden glücklich sein und wollen nicht mehr darben. Verschlemmen soll nicht der faule Bauch, was fleißige Hände erwarben. Es wächst hienieden Brot genug für alle Menschenkinder, auch Rosen und Myrten, Schönheit und Lust und Zuckererbsen nicht minder. Ja, Zuckererbsen für jedermann, sobald die Schoten platzen. Den Himmel überlassen wir den Engeln und den Spatzen. Und wachsen uns Flügel nach dem Tod, so wollen wir euch besuchen dort oben, und wir essen mit euch die seligsten Torten und Kuchen. Ein neues Lied, ein besseres Lied, es klingt wie Flöten und Geigen. Das Miserere ist vorbei, die Sterbeglocken schweigen. Die Jungfer Europa ist verlobt mit dem schönen Geniusse der Freiheit. Sie liegen einander im Arm, sie schwelgen im ersten Kusse. Und fehlt der Pfaffensegen dabei, die Ehe wird gültig nicht minder. Es lebe Bräutigam und Braut und ihre zukünftigen Kinder. Ein Hochzeitskarmen ist mein Lied, das Bessere, das Neue. In meiner Seele gehen auf die Sterne der höchsten Weihe. Begeisterte Sterne, sie lodern wild, zerfließen in Flammenbächen. Ich fühle mich wunderbar erstarkt, ich könnte Eichen zerbrechen. Seit ich auf deutsche Erde trat, durchströmen mich Zaubersäfte. Der Riese hat wieder die Mutter berührt, und es wuchsen ihm neu die Kräfte. End of Deutschland, ein Wintermärchen, Chapter 1 by Heinrich Heine. Recording by DomBombadil.
Dorothy and the Wizard in Oz, Chapter 1, The Earthquake, by L. Frank Baum. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Rachel. The train from Frisco was very late. It should have arrived at Hugson's Siding at midnight, but it was already 5 o'clock, and the grey dawn was breaking in the east, when the little train slowly rumbled up to the open shed that served for the station house. As it came to a stop, the conductor called out in a loud voice, "Hugson's Siding!" At once a little girl rose from her seat and walked to the door of the car, carrying a wicker suitcase in one hand and a round bird cage covered up with newspapers in the other, while a parasol was tucked under her arm. The conductor helped her off the car, and then the engineer started his train again, so that it puffed and groaned and moved slowly away up the track. The reason he was so late was because all through the night there were times when the solid earth shook and trembled under him, and the engineer was afraid that at any moment the rails might spread apart and an accident happen to his passengers. So he moved the cars slowly and with caution. The little girl stood still to watch until the train had disappeared around a curve, then she turned to see where she was. The shed at Hugson's Siding was bare save for an old wooden bench, and did not look very inviting. As she peered through the soft grey light, not a house of any sort was visible near the station, nor was any person in sight, but after a while the child discovered a horse and buggy standing near a group of trees a short distance away. She walked toward it, and found the horse tied to a tree and standing motionless, with its head hanging down almost to the ground. It was a big horse, tall and bony, with long legs and large knees and feet. She could see his ribs easily where they showed through the skin of his body, and his head was long and seemed altogether too big for him, as if it did not fit. His tail was short and scraggly, and his harness had been broken in many places and fastened together again with cords and bits of wire. The buggy seemed almost new, for it had a shiny top and side curtains. Getting around in front so that she could look inside, the girl saw a boy curled up on the seat, fast asleep. She set down the bird cage and poked the boy with her parasol. Presently he woke up, rose to a sitting position, and rubbed his eyes briskly. "Hello," he said, seeing her. "Are you Dorothy Gale?" "Yes," she answered, looking gravely at his tousled hair and blinking grey eyes. "Have you come to take me to Hugson's ranch?" "Of course," he answered. "Train in?" "I couldn't be here if it wasn't," she said. He laughed at that, and his laugh was merry and frank. Jumping out of the buggy, he put Dorothy's suitcase under the seat, and her bird cage on the floor in front. "Canary birds?" he asked. "Oh, no, it's just Eureka, my kitten. I thought that was the best way to carry her." The boy nodded. "Eureka is a funny name for a cat," he remarked. "I named my kitten that because I found it," she explained. "Uncle Henry says Eureka means I have found it." "All right, hop in." She climbed into the buggy and he followed her. Then the boy picked up the reins, shook them, and said, "Get up!" The horse did not stir. Dorothy thought he just wiggled one of his drooping ears, but that was all. "Get up!" called the boy again. The horse stood still. "Perhaps," said Dorothy, "if you untied him he would go." The boy laughed cheerfully and jumped out. "Guess I'm half asleep yet," he said, untying the horse. "But Jim knows his business all right, don't you, Jim?" patting the long nose of the animal. Then he got into the buggy again and took the reins, and the horse at once backed away from the tree, turned slowly around, and began to trot down the sandy road which was just visible in the dim light. "Thought that train would never come," observed the boy. "I've waited at that station for 5 hours." "We had a lot of earthquakes," said Dorothy. "Didn't you feel the ground shake?" "Yes, but we're used to such things in California," he replied. "They don't scare us much." The conductor said it was the worst quake he ever knew. "Did he? Then it must have happened while I was asleep," he said thoughtfully. "How is Uncle Henry?" she inquired after a pause, during which the horse continued to trot with long regular strides. "He's pretty well. He and Uncle Hugson have been having a fine visit." "Is Mr. Hugson your uncle?" she asked. "Yes. Uncle Bill Hugson married your Uncle Henry's wife's sister, so we must be second cousins," said the boy in an amused tone. "I work for Uncle Bill on his ranch, and he pays me $6 a month and my board." "Isn't that a great deal?" she asked doubtfully. "Why, it's a great deal for Uncle Hugson, but not for me. I'm a splendid worker. I work as well as I sleep," he added with a laugh. "What is your name?" asked Dorothy, thinking she liked the boy's manner, and the cheery tone of his voice. "Not a very pretty one," he answered, as if a little ashamed. "My whole name is Zebediah, but folks just call me Zeb. You've been to Australia, haven't you?" "Yes, with Uncle Henry," she answered. "We got to San Francisco a week ago, and Uncle Henry went right on to Hugson's ranch for a visit, while I stayed a few days in the city with some friends we had met." "How long will you be with us?" he asked. "Only a day. Tomorrow Uncle Henry and I must start back for Kansas. We've been away a long time, you know, and so we're anxious to get home again." The boy flicked the big bony horse with his whip and looked thoughtful. Then he started to say something to his little companion, but before he could speak the buggy began to sway dangerously from side to side, and the earth seemed to rise up before them. Next minute there was a roar and a sharp crash, and at her side Dorothy saw the ground open in a wide crack and then come together again. "Goodness!" she cried, grasping the iron rail of the seat. "What was that?" "That was an awful big quake," replied Zeb with a white face. "It almost got us that time, Dorothy." The horse had stopped short and stood firm as a rock. Zeb shook the reins and urged him to go, but Jim was stubborn. Then the boy cracked his whip and touched the animal's flanks with it, and after a low moan of protest Jim stepped slowly along the road. Neither the boy nor the girl spoke again for some minutes. There was a breath of danger in the very air, and every few moments the earth would shake violently. Jim's ears were standing erect upon his head, and every muscle of his big body was tense as he trotted toward home. He was not going very fast, but on his flanks specks of foam began to appear, and at times he would tremble like a leaf. The sky had grown darker again, and the wind made queer sobbing sounds as it swept over the valley. Suddenly there was a rending, tearing sound, and the earth split into another great crack just beneath the spot where the horse was standing. With a wild neigh of terror the animal fell bodily into the pit, drawing the buggy and its occupants after him. Dorothy grabbed fast hold of the buggy top, and the boy did the same. The sudden rush into space confused them so that they could not think. Blackness engulfed them on every side, and in breathless silence they waited for the fall to end and crush them against jagged rocks, or for the earth to close in on them again and bury them forever in its dreadful depths. The horrible sensation of falling, the darkness and the terrifying noises, proved more than Dorothy could endure, and for a few moments the little girl lost consciousness. Zeb, being a boy, did not faint, but he was badly frightened, and clung to the buggy seat with a tight grip, expecting every moment would be his last. End of Dorothy and the Wizard in Oz, Chapter 1, The Earthquake.
How the Other Half Lives. Studies Among the Tenements of New York. Chapter 1. Genesis of the Tenements. By Jacob A. Rees. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Bruce Kachuk. The first tenement New York knew bore the mark of Cain from its birth, though a generation passed before the writing was deciphered. It was the Rear House, infamous ever after in our city's history. There had been tenant houses before, but they were not built for the purpose. Nothing would probably have shocked their original owners more than the idea of their harboring a promiscuous crowd, for they were the decorous homes of the old Knickerbockers, the proud aristocracy of Manhattan in the early days. It was the stir and bustle of trade, together with the tremendous immigration that followed upon the War of 1812, that dislodged them. In 35 years, the city of less than 100,000 came to harbor 500,000 souls, for whom homes had to be found. Within the memory of men not yet in their prime, Washington had moved from his house on Cherry Hill, as too far out of town to be easily reached. Now the old residents followed his example, but they moved in a different direction and for a different reason. Their comfortable dwellings in the once fashionable streets along the East River front fell into the hands of real estate agents and boarding-house keepers. And here, says the report to the legislature of 1857, when the evils engendered had excited just alarm, in its beginning, the tenant house became a real blessing to that class of industrious poor whose small earnings limited their expenses, and whose employment in workshops, stores, or about the warehouses and thoroughfares render a near residence of much importance. Not for long, however. As business increased and the city grew with rapid strides, the necessities of the poor became the opportunity of their wealthier neighbors, and the stamp was set upon the old houses, suddenly become valuable, which the best thought and effort of a later age has vainly struggled to efface. Their large rooms were partitioned into several smaller ones, without regard to light or ventilation, the rate of rent being lower in proportion to space or height from the street, and they soon became filled from cellar to garret with a class of tenantry living from hand to mouth, loose in morals, improvident in habits, degraded and squalid as beggary itself. It was thus the dark bedroom, prolific of untold depravities, came into the world. It was destined to survive the old houses. In their new role, says the old report, eloquent in its indignant denunciation of evils more destructive than wars, they were not intended to last. Rents were fixed high enough to cover damage and abuse from this class, from whom nothing was expected, and the most was made of them while they lasted. Neatness, order, cleanliness were never dreamed of in connection with the tenant house system, as it spread its localities from year to year, while reckless slovenliness, discontent, privation, and ignorance were left to work out their invariable results, until the entire premises reached the level of tenant house dilapidation, containing, but sheltering not, the miserable hordes that crowded beneath smoldering, water-rotted roofs, or burrowed among the rats of clammy cellars. Yet so illogical is human greed that, at a later day, when called to account, the proprietors frequently urged the filthy habits of the tenants as an excuse for the condition of their property, utterly losing sight of the fact that it was the tolerance of those habits which was the real evil, and that for this they themselves were alone responsible. Still, the pressure of the crowds did not abate, and in the old garden, where the stolid Dutch burgher grew his tulips or early cabbages, a rear house was built, generally of wood, 2 stories high at first. Presently it was carried up another story and another. Where 2 families had lived, 10 moved in. The front house followed suit, if the brick walls were strong enough. The question was not always asked, judging from complaints made by a contemporary witness, that the old buildings were often carried up to a great height without regard to the strength of the foundation walls. It was rent the owner was after. Nothing was said in the contract about either the safety or the comfort of the tenants. The garden gate no longer swung on its rusty hinges. The shell-paved walk had become an alley. What the rear house had left of the garden, a court. Plenty such are yet to be found in the 4th Ward, with here and there one of the original rear tenements. Worse was to follow. it was soon perceived by estate owners and agents of property that a greater percentage of profits could be realized by the conversion of houses and blocks into barracks, and dividing their space into smaller proportions capable of containing human life within 4 walls. Blocks were rented of real estate owners, or purchased on time, or taken in charge at a percentage, and held for underletting. With the appearance of the middleman, wholly irresponsible and utterly reckless and unrestrained, began the era of tenement building, which turned out such blocks as Gotham Court, where, in one cholera epidemic that scarcely touched the clean boards, the tenants died at the rate of 195 to the 1,000 of population, which forced the general mortality of the city up from 1 in 41.83 in 1815 to 1 in 27.33 in 1855, a year of unusual freedom from epidemic disease, and which wrung from the early organizers of the health department this wail: there are numerous examples of tenement houses in which are lodged several hundred people that have a pro rata allotment of ground area scarcely equal to 2 square yards upon the city lot, courtyards and all included. The tenement house population had swelled to 500,000 souls by that time, and on the east side, in what is still the most densely populated district in all the world, China not excluded, it was packed at the rate of 290,000 to the square mile, a state of affairs wholly unexampled. The utmost cupidity of other lands and other days had never contrived to herd much more than half that number within the same space. The greatest crowding of old London was at the rate of 175,816. Swine roamed the streets and gutters as their principal scavengers. The death of a child in a tenement was registered at the Bureau of Vital Statistics as plainly due to suffocation in the foul air of an unventilated apartment, and the senators, who had come down from Albany to find out what was the matter with New York, reported that there are annually cut off from the population by disease and death enough human beings to people a city, and enough human labor to sustain it. And yet experts had testified that, as compared with uptown, rents were from 25 to 30% higher in the worst slums of the lower wards, with such accommodations as were enjoyed, for instance, by a family with boarders in Cedar Street who fed hogs in the cellar that contained 8 or 10 loads of manure, or one room 12 by 12 with 5 families living in it, comprising 20 persons of both sexes and all ages, with only 2 beds, without partition, screen, chair, or table. The rate of rent has been successfully maintained to the present day, though the hog, at least, has been eliminated. Lest anybody flatter himself with the notion that these were evils of a day that is happily past, and may safely be forgotten, let me mention here 3 very recent instances of tenement house life that came under my notice. One was the burning of a rear house in Mott Street, from appearances one of the original tenant houses that made their owners rich. The fire made homeless 10 families, who had paid an average of $5 a month for their mean little cubby-holes. The owner himself told me that it was fully insured for $800, though it brought him in $600 a year rent. He evidently considered himself especially entitled to be pitied for losing such valuable property. Another was the case of a hard-working family of man and wife, young people from the old country, who took poison together in a Crosby Street tenement because they were tired. There was no other explanation, and none was needed when I stood in the room in which they had lived. It was in the attic, with sloping ceiling and a single window so far out on the roof that it seemed not to belong to the place at all. With scarcely room enough to turn around in, they had been compelled to pay $5.50 a month in advance. There were 4 such rooms in that attic, and together they brought in as much as many a handsome little cottage in a pleasant part of Brooklyn. The third instance was that of a colored family of husband, wife, and baby in a wretched rear rookery in West 3rd Street. Their rent was $8.50 for a single room on the top story, so small that I was unable to get a photograph of it, even by placing the camera outside the open door. 3 short steps across either way would have measured its full extent. There was just one excuse for the early tenement house builders, and their successors may plead it with nearly as good right for what it is worth. Such, says an official report, is the lack of house room in the city that any kind of tenement can be immediately crowded with lodgers if there is space offered. Thousands were living in cellars. There were 300 underground lodging houses in the city when the health department was organized. Some 15 years before that, the old Baptist church in Mulberry Street, just off Chatham Street, had been sold, and the rear half of the frame structure had been converted into tenements. That with their swarming population became the scandal even of that reckless age. The wretched pile harbored no less than 40 families, and the annual rate of deaths to the population was officially stated to be 75 in 1,000. These tenements were an extreme type of very many, for the big barracks had by this time spread east and west, and far up the island into the sparsely settled wards. Whether or not the title was clear to the land upon which they were built was of less account than that the rents were collected. If there were damages to pay, the tenant had to foot them. Cases were very frequent when property was in litigation, and 2 or 3 different parties were collecting rents. Of course, under such circumstances, no repairs were ever made. The climax had been reached. The situation was summed up by the Society for the Improvement of the Condition of the Poor in these words: crazy old buildings, crowded rear tenements in filthy yards, dark, damp basements, leaking garrets, shops, outhouses, and stables converted into dwellings, though scarcely fit to shelter brutes, are habitations of thousands of our fellow beings in this wealthy Christian city. The city, says its historian Mrs. Martha Lamb, commenting on the era of aqueduct building between 1835 and 1845, was a general asylum for vagrants. Young vagabonds, the natural offspring of such home conditions, overran the streets. Juvenile crime increased fearfully year by year. The Children's Aid Society and kindred philanthropic organizations were yet unborn. But in the city directory was to be found the address of the American Society for the Promotion of Education in Africa. End of How the Other Half Lives. Studies Among the Tenements of New York. Chapter 1. Genesis of the Tenement. By Jacob A. Riis.
Na srebrnym globie. Chapter 1. By Jerzy Żuławski. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Recording by Piotr. 50 lat blisko upłynęło już od owej podwójnej wyprawy, najszaleńszej zaiste, jaką kiedykolwiek człowiek przedsięwziął i wykonał. I cała rzecz poszła już niemal zupełnie w zapomnienie, gdy pewnego dnia w jednym z dzienników w K pojawił się podpisany przez asystenta małego miejscowego obserwatorium artykuł, przypominający wszystko na nowo. Autor artykułu twierdził, że ma w ręku niewątpliwe wiadomości o losie wystrzelonych przed 50 laty na księżyc szaleńców. Rzecz narobiła wiele wrzawy, chociaż początkowo nie brano jej zbyt poważnie. Ci, co słyszeli lub czytali o owym szalonym przedsięwzięciu, wiedzieli, że śmiali awanturnicy ponieśli śmierć. Ruszali więc teraz ramionami na wieść, że ci, od dawna za umarłych uważani, nie tylko żyją, ale przysyłają nawet wiadomości wprost z księżyca. Asystent mimo wszystko uporczywie obstawał przy swoim zdaniu i pokazywał ciekawym stożkową żelazną kulę 40 cm szeroką, w której miał odnaleźć rękopis na księżycu sporządzony. Misternie odkręcającą się wewnątrz próżną kulę, pokrytą grubą warstwą rdzy i żużlu, można było oglądać i podziwiać. Rękopisu jednakże asystent nikomu nie chciał pokazać. Twierdził, że to papiery zwęglone, których treść on dopiero odczytuje za pomocą sztucznych zdjęć fotograficznych, robionych z wielkim trudem i największą ostrożnością. Ta tajemniczość wzbudzała podejrzenia, zwłaszcza że asystent do tego czasu nie powiedział, jak doszedł do posiadania kuli. Ale zaciekawienie wzrastało ciągle. Czekano z pewnym niedowierzaniem przyrzeczonych wyjaśnień, a tymczasem zaczęto sobie przypominać ze współczesnych pism dzieje całej wyprawy. I nagle zaczęli się ludzie dziwić, że mogli tak prędko zapomnieć. Wszakże w czasie owej wyprawy nie było pisma codziennego, tygodniowego lub miesięcznego, które by przez kilka lat z rzędu nie poczuwało się do obowiązku poświęcenia w każdym numerze kilku szpalt temu wypadkowi, tak niesłychanemu i nieprawdopodobnemu. Przed samą wyprawą pełno było wszędzie sprawozdań ze stanu robót przygotowawczych. Opisywano niemal każdą śrubę w wagonie, który miał przebyć międzyplanetarne przestrzenie i wysadzić śmiałych szaleńców na powierzchnię Księżyca, znaną do tego czasu jedynie ze znakomitych zdjęć fotograficznych dokonywanych od szeregu lat w Lake Observatory. Zajmowano się żywo wszystkimi szczegółami przedsięwzięcia. Na naczelnym miejscu umieszczano portrety i życiorysy obszerne podróżników. Wiele wrzawy wywołała wieść o cofnięciu się jednego z nich w ostatniej niemal chwili, bo niespełna na 2 tygodnie przed wyznaczonym terminem odjazdu. Ci sami, co niedawno jeszcze rzucali gromy na cały niedorzeczny i awanturniczy plan wyprawy, a uczestników jej nazywali wprost półgłówkami, zasługującymi jedynie na dożywotnie zamknięcie w szpitalu, oburzali się teraz na tchórzostwo i odstępstwo człowieka, co powiedział otwarcie, że się spodziewa mieć grób na ziemi, również spokojny, a nie równie późniejszy niż jego niedoszli towarzysze na Księżycu. Największe jednak zaciekawienie wywołała osoba nowego śmiałka, zgłaszającego się na opróżnione miejsce. Przypuszczano powszechnie, że go uczestnicy wyprawy nie przyjmą do swego grona, gdyż czas był już za krótki, aby nowy towarzysz mógł odbyć konieczne przedwstępne ćwiczenia, którym tamci przez kilka lat się oddawali, doszedłszy w końcu do niesłychanych wprost wyników. Opowiadano o nich, że nauczyli się znosić w lekkiem odzieniu mróz 40-stopniowy i 40-stopniowe gorąco, obywać się całymi dniami bez wody i oddychać bez szkody dla zdrowia powietrzem bez porównania rzadszym od atmosfery ziemskiej na wysokich górach. Jakież wtedy było zdziwienie, gdy się dowiedziano, że nowy ochotnik, przyjęty, dopełni liczby lunatyków, jakich nazywano. To tylko sprawozdawców pism doprowadzało do rozpaczy, że nie mogli się dowiedzieć bliższych szczegółów o tym tajemniczym awanturniku. Mimo natarczywe nalegania nie dopuszczał on do siebie reporterów, ba, nawet nie przysłał żadnemu dziennikowi fotografii, ani nie odpowiadał na listowne zapytania. Inni członkowie wyprawy zachowywali również ścisłe milczenie co do jego osoby. Na 2 dni dopiero przed wyruszeniem wyprawy w drogę pojawiła się wiadomość bliższa, choć nieco fantastyczna. Jednemu z dziennikarzy udało się, po wielu trudach, zobaczyć nowego uczestnika przedsięwzięcia i rozpuścił natychmiast wieść, że to ma być kobieta w przebraniu męskim. Nie bardzo wierzono tej pogłosce, a zresztą nie było już czasu zajmować się nią. Stanowcza chwila nadchodziła. Gorączkowe oczekiwanie zmieniło się po prostu w szał. Okolica nad ujściem Kongo, skąd wyprawa miała wyruszyć w drogę, zaroiła się od ludzi, przybyłych ze wszystkich części świata. Fantastyczny pomysł Juliusza Vernego miał być nareszcie urzeczywistnionym w 100 kilkadziesiąt lat od śmierci swego autora. Na wybrzeżu Afryki, 20 kilka kilometrów od ujścia Kongo, zionął otwór obszerny, gotowej już studni z lanej stali, która miała za kilkanaście godzin wystrzelić na Księżyc pierwszy pocisk z zamkniętymi w nim 5 śmiałkami. Osobna komisja sprawdziła jeszcze raz w pośpiechu wszystkie zawiłe obliczenia. Zrobiono raz jeszcze przegląd zapasów i narzędzi. Wszystko było w porządku, wszystko było gotowe. Na drugi dzień, na krótko przed wschodem słońca, potworny huk wybuchu oznajmił światu na paręset kilometrów wokoło, że podróż rozpoczęta. Według niezmiernie ścisłych i dokładnych obliczeń pocisk miał pod działaniem wybuchowej siły prostopadłego rzutu, przyciągania Ziemi i siły rozpędowej, nabytej przez dzienny obrót Ziemi dookoła swej osi, zakreślić w przestworzu olbrzymią parabolę z zachodu na wschód. I wszedłszy w oznaczonym punkcie i w oznaczonej godzinie w sferę przyciągania Księżyca, spaść prawie prostopadle na środek jego tarczy, ku nam zwróconej, w okolicy Sinus Medii. Bieg pocisku, obserwowany z różnych punktów Ziemi przez setki teleskopów, okazał się zupełnie prawidłowym. Dla patrzących pocisk zdawał się cofać na niebie w kierunku od wschodu na zachód, zrazu znacznie wolniej niż słońce, potem coraz szybciej, w miarę jak się od Ziemi oddalał. Ten ruch pozorny był wynikiem obrotu Ziemi, wobec którego pocisk w tyle pozostawał. Śledzono go długo, aż wreszcie w pobliżu Księżyca już i najsilniejsze teleskopy nie były zdolne go spostrzec. Mimo to łączność między zamkniętymi w pocisku awanturnikami a ziemią nie ustawała jeszcze przez pewien czas ani na chwilę. Podróżnicy, obok mnóstwa innych narzędzi, zabrali ze sobą znakomity aparat do telegrafii bez drutu, który według obliczeń powinien był funkcjonować nawet na odległość 384 000 kilometrów dzielących Księżyc od Ziemi. Obliczenia Atoli zawiodły w tym wypadku. Ostatnią depeszę otrzymały stacje astronomiczne z odległości 260 000 kilometrów. Czy to ze względu na niedostateczną siłę prądu wytwarzającego fale, czy też wadliwą budowę przyrządu, telegrafowanie na większą odległość było niemożliwe. Ale ostatnia depesza brzmiała nader zachęcająco. Wszystko dobrze, nie ma powodu do obaw. W 6 tygodni wysłano, według umowy, drugą wyprawę. Tym razem znalazło w pocisku pomieszczenie 2 tylko ludzi. Wieźli za to ze sobą znacznie większe zapasy żywności i potrzebniejszych narzędzi. Aparat telegraficzny mieli znacznie silniejszy niźli poprzedni. Nie było wątpliwości, że wystarczy do przesyłania wiadomości z Księżyca. Atoli z Księżyca depeszy już nie otrzymano. Ostatni telegram wysłali już podróżnicy z pobliża celu wyprawy, przed samym spadkiem na księżycową powierzchnię. Wiadomość była nie najpomyślniejsza. Pocisk z niewytłumaczonej przyczyny zboczył nieco z drogi i wskutek tego widocznem było, że spadnie na Księżyc nie prostopadle, lecz skośnie, pod kątem dość ostrym. Ponieważ pocisk nie był zbudowany dla takiego spadku, więc podróżnicy obawiali się, czy nie poniosą śmierci przez rozbicie. Widocznie obawy się spełniły, gdyż to była ostatnia depesza. Wobec tego zaniechano zamierzonych wypraw dalszych. Nie można się było łudzić co do losu nieszczęśliwców. Po cóż było powiększać jeszcze bezużyteczne ofiary? Żal jakiś i wstyd ogarnął ludzi. Najwięksi zwolennicy międzyplanetarnej komunikacji przycichli teraz, a o wyprawach mówiono i pisano już tylko jako o szaleństwie, będącem wprost zbrodnią. W kilka lat wreszcie cała rzecz poszła w zapomnienie na długi przeciąg czasu. Przypomniał ją dopiero, jak się powiedziało, artykuł nieznanego dotąd, a wkrótce głośnego asystenta w drugorzędnym obserwatorium astronomicznym. Odtąd każdy tydzień przynosił coś nowego. Asystent odsłaniał powoli rąbki swej tajemnicy, a chociaż niedowiarków nigdy nie brakło, zaczęto zapatrywać się na rzecz coraz poważniej. Sensacyjna wieść rozeszła się w końcu po całym cywilizowanym świecie. Wreszcie asystent opowiedział, w jaki sposób doszedł do posiadania cennego rękopisu i jak go odczytał, a nawet pozwolił ludziom fachowym oglądać jego zwęglone szczątki wraz z cudownymi iście odbitkami fotograficznymi. Otóż jak się rzecz miała z ową kulą i rękopisem. Pewnego dnia po południu, opowiadał asystent, gdy siedziałem zajęty notowaniem codziennych spostrzeżeń meteorologicznych, oznajmił mi służący zakładu, że jakiś młody człowiek chce ze mną mówić. Był to mój kolega i dobry przyjaciel, właściciel wioski nieopodal położonej. Widywałem go rzadko, gdyż, choć mieszkał niedaleko, nieczęsto się do miasta wybierał. Zatrzymałem go tedy i uporawszy się co prędzej z robotą, wyszedłem do drugiego pokoju, gdzie mnie, jak zauważyłem, niecierpliwie oczekiwał. Zaraz po powitaniu oświadczył, że mi przynosi wiadomość, która mię ucieszy niewątpliwie. Wiedział, że od kilku lat zajmuję się z zapałem badaniem meteorytów. Przyszedł mi tedy powiedzieć, że przed kilku dniami spadł w jego wiosce meteor, znaczny jak się zdaje wielkości. Kamienia nie znaleziono, gdyż spadł w trzęsawisko i prawdopodobnie zagłębił się znacznie. Ale jeśli go chcę mieć, on jest gotów dać mi kilku robotników dla jego wydobycia. Kamień naturalnie chciałem mieć i uwolniwszy się na parę dni z obserwatorium, pojechałem sam na miejsce w celu poszukiwań. Ale mimo niewątpliwych znaków i usilnej pracy nie mogliśmy nic znaleźć. Wydobyto tylko duży kawał obrobionego żelaziwa kształtu kuli armatniej, której obecność w tem miejscu mocno mnie zadziwiła. Zwątpiłem już o pomyślnym wyniku poszukiwań i wydałem właśnie polecenie zaprzestania dalszych robót, gdy przyjaciel zwrócił moją uwagę na ową kulę. Istotnie wyglądała zastanawiająco. Powierzchnia jej była pokryta żużlem, jaki się tworzy na żelaznych meteorytach przy rozżarzaniu się ich podczas przejścia przez atmosferę ziemską. Czyżby to ona miała być owym spadłym meteorytem? W tej chwili, nagle, błysnęła mi pierwsza myśl. Przypomniała mi się wyprawa sprzed lat 50, której historię znałem dość dobrze. Muszę dodać, że nie podzielałem nigdy przekonania o bezwzględnej zatracie podróżników, mimo beznadziejnej treści ostatniej depeszy, jaką od nich ziemia otrzymała. Za wcześnie było jednak teraz wyjawiać domysły. Zabrałem więc tylko kulę i przewiozłem z największą ostrożnością do domu. pewny niemal w duchu, że znajdę w niej cenne wskazówki o tych zagubionych. Z jej niewielkiego względnie ciężaru odgadłem zaraz, że jest wydrążona. W domu, w największej tajemnicy, zabrałem się do roboty. Nie łudziłem się ani na chwilę, że jeżeli się w niej znajdują jakieś papiery, to musiały one ulec zwęgleniu podczas rozpalenia się żelaza w ziemskiej atmosferze. Należało zatem otworzyć kulę tak, aby tych przypuszczalnych szczątków nie zniszczyć, a może, myślałem, da się z nich co odcyfrować. Praca była nadzwyczajnie ciężka, zwłaszcza, że nie chciałem brać nikogo do pomocy. Przypuszczenia moje zbyt były niepewne, a nawet, przyznaję, fantastyczne, aby je można było przedwcześnie rozgłosić. Spostrzegłem, że szczyt kuli stanowi śruba, którą należało odkręcić. Osadziłem więc kulę szczelnie w ciężkim śrubsztaku, aby ją uchronić od wstrząśnień mogących uszkodzić jej zawartość, i zabrałem się do roboty. Śruba była zardzewiała i nie chciała odchodzić. Po długich usiłowaniach nareszcie udało mi się ją poruszyć. Pamiętam, ten pierwszy zgrzyt obracanej śruby przejął mię dreszczem radości i niepokoju zarazem. Musiałem pracę przerwać na chwilę, gdyż trzęsły mi się ręce. Powróciłem do niej po godzinie z bijącym jeszcze sercem. Śruba poruszała się zwolna, gdy wtem posłyszałem dziwny świst. Początkowo nie mogłem zrozumieć jego przyczyny. Prawie bezmyślnie poruszyłem śrubą w odwrotnym kierunku i świst ustał natychmiast. Zaledwie jednak znów nieco odkręciłem śrubę, dał się zaraz słyszeć, choć był teraz słabszy. Nareszcie pojąłem wszystko. Wnętrze kuli było całkowitą próżnią. Świst pochodził z wdzierania się powietrza do środka szczeliną przez rozluźnienie śruby utworzoną. Ta okoliczność upewniła mnie w przekonaniu, że jeżeli kula zawiera w sobie papiery, to nie będą one całkiem zniszczone, gdyż brak powietrza musiał je uchronić od spalenia, gdy kula rozżarzyła się, przebywając w ziemską atmosferę. W parę chwil przekonałem się o słuszności tych domysłów. Po usunięciu śruby znalazłem w kuli, której wnętrze wyłożone było jeszcze warstwą wypalonej gliny, zwój papierów, zwęglonych, ale nie spalonych. Nie mogłem prawie oddychać z obawy, aby tych cennych dokumentów nie uszkodzić. Wyjąłem je z największą ostrożnością i popadłem w rozpacz. Na zwęglonym papierze litery były prawie niewidoczne, a ponadto papier był tak kruchy, że się niemal rozsypywał w ręku. Bądź co bądź postanowiłem dokonać dzieła i treść rękopisu odczytać. Kilka dni zeszło mi na rozmyślaniu, jak się wziąć do tego. Wreszcie uciekłem się do pomocy promieni rentgenowskich. Przypuszczałem, i jak się później okazało słusznie, że atrament, którego użyto do pisania, zawierał składniki mineralne, a zatem zaczernione nim miejsca będą stawiały większy opór promieniom rentgenowskim niż sam zwęglony papier. Naklejałem tedy ostrożnie każdą kartę rękopisu na cienką błonę, rozpiętą w ramię, i robiłem rentgenowskie zdjęcia fotograficzne. W ten sposób otrzymałem klisze, które po przeniesieniu obrazu na papier dały mi rodzaj palimpsestów, gdzie litery, po obu stronach papieru pisane, łączyły się ze sobą. Było to trudne do odczytania, ale bynajmniej nie niemożliwe. Za kilka tygodni postąpiłem był już tak daleko z odczytywaniem rękopisu, że nie widziałem potrzeby zachowywania dłużej całej rzeczy w tajemnicy. Wtedy to napisałem ów pierwszy artykuł donoszący o wypadku. Dzisiaj leży przede mną cały rękopis gotowy, odczytany, uporządkowany i przepisany i nie mam zgoła wątpliwości, że został zapisany na Księżycu ręką jednego z 5 najpierw wyprawionych podróżników i wysłany z Księżyca na Ziemię. Co do reszty, treść rękopisu mówi sama za siebie. Do tego wyjaśnienia, które poprzedziło ogłoszenie tekstu rękopisu, dodał asystent krótką historię samejże wyprawy. Przypomniał zatem, że pierwsza myśl wyszła od irlandzkiego astronoma Otamora, a pierwszym jej zapalonym i niewątpiącym w urzeczywistnienie zwolennikiem stał się młody, sławny podówczas w Brazylii portugalski inżynier Piotr Varadol. Ci, pozyskawszy trzeciego towarzysza w Polaku, Janie Koreckim, który im oddał do rozporządzenia całą, dość znaczną fortunę, rozpoczęli zabiegi około urzeczywistnienia jasno już określonego planu. Przede wszystkim tedy przedstawiono szkice projektu akademiom i ciałom naukowym, a następnie wezwano pomocy fachowych powag do opracowania jego szczegółów. Myśl spotkała się z nadspodziewanym uznaniem i obudziła zapał. Wkrótce nie była to już sprawa kilku ludzi, lecz całego cywilizowanego świata, który zapragnął wysłać swych przedstawicieli na Księżyc celem dowiedzenia się bliższych szczegółów o tym globie. Na wniosek akademii i astronomicznych instytutów rządy pośpieszyły z pomocą pieniężną, a że nie brakło i znacznych ofiar prywatnych, więc wkrótce inicjatorowie mieli do rozporządzenia kapitały, z którymi można było już nie jednę, ale kilka wypraw urządzić. Tak też postanowiono. Jak wiadomo jednak, 2 tylko z tych wypraw doszły do skutku. Załogę pierwszego pocisku stanowić miało 5 ludzi, w tej liczbie 3 autorowie projektu. 4. był Anglik, lekarz Tomasz Woodbell, 5. Niemiec Braun, który wszakże cofnął się w ostatniej chwili. Na miejsce jego zgłosił się nieznajomy ochotnik. W drugim pocisku zamknęło się 2 braci, Francuzów, nazwiskiem Remonier. Po tym krótkim zarysie historycznym asystent w dalszym ciągu memoriału rozwodził się obszernie nad techniczną stroną przedsięwzięcia. Opowiadał tedy szczegółowo zbudowanie olbrzymiej armaty w kształcie stalowej studni. Mówił o budowie pocisku, który po dostaniu się na bezpowietrzną powierzchnię Księżyca można było zamienić na hermetycznie zamknięty wóz, poruszany osobnym motorem elektrycznym. Opisywał przyrządy ochronne, mające podróżników zabezpieczyć od zmiażdżenia w chwili wystrzału, a następnie spadku na Księżyc. Wreszcie wymieniał wszystkie przedmioty składające się na wewnętrzne urządzenie i zaopatrzenie przenośnego pokoju. Księżyc nie jest światem gościnnym. Astronomowie wiedzą o tem od dawna, chociaż go znają tylko z daleka i jednostronnie. Mimo niesłychanego udoskonalenia przyrządów optycznych w XX wieku, Księżyc oparł się zwycięsko próbom przybliżenia go do Ziemi za ich pomocą na taką odległość, aby można było zbadać wszystkie szczegóły jego powierzchni. Krążąc około Ziemi w średniej odległości 384 000 kilometrów, wydaje się w szkłach o 1000-krotnym powiększeniu odległym od niej na 384 kilometry, co stanowi jeszcze zawsze pokaźny kawałek drogi. Silniejszych zaś szkieł nie można używać do jego badania, gdyż przy znaczniejszym powiększeniu z powodu za małej przeźroczystości atmosfery ziemskiej otrzymuje się obraz tak niewyraźny, że niepodobna poznać na nim nawet gór, w słabszych szkłach dokładnie widocznych. Nadto badaniu dostępna jest tylko jedna półkula księżycowego globu. Księżyc bowiem, odbywając swą drogę naokoło Ziemi w 27 dniach, 7 godzinach, 43 minutach i 11 sekundach, wykonywa w tym czasie tylko jeden obrót około swej osi, tak że zwrócony jest ku Ziemi zawsze tą samą stroną swej powierzchni. Zjawisko to nie jest przypadkowe. Księżyc nie jest dokładną kulą, ale zbliża się kształtem do bardzo mało wydłużonego jaja. Siła przyciągania Ziemi sprawia, że jajo owe zwraca się ku niej ostrym końcem i tak krąży, jakby na uwięzi, nie mogąc się odwrócić. Znana astronomom połowa Księżyca wystarczyła jednak, aby go zdyskredytować najzupełniej w opinii ludzi, marzących o zamieszkaniu innych niż Ziemia światów. Ta powierzchnia naszego satelity, większa co do obszaru 2 razy od Europy, przedstawia się w teleskopach jako bezwodna i pustynna wyżyna, zasiana wprost niezliczoną ilością obrączkowych gór, podobnych z kształtu do olbrzymich kraterów, nierzadko o 100-kilometrowej średnicy, których brzegi wznoszą się do 7000 metrów ponad okoliczne równiny. W północnej części, zwróconej ku nam półkuli, ciągnie się szereg obszernych kolistych płaszczyzn, nazwanych przez pierwszych selenografów morzami. Równiny te o stromych brzegach, utworzonych przez niebotyczne łańcuchy górskie, poprzerzynane są w różnych kierunkach mnóstwem szczelin, których pochodzenie zawsze zastanawiało astronomów, zwłaszcza że na Ziemi nie istnieje nic podobnego. Szczeliny te, nieraz na 100 kilkadziesiąt kilometrów długie, a na parę szerokie, dochodzą głębokością do 1000 metrów i więcej. Jeśli sobie uprzytomnimy jeszcze, że ta powierzchnia pozbawiona jest niemal zupełnie atmosfery, że dzień księżycowy, trwający naszych dni 14, jest tam latem, podczas którego upał dochodzi do niesłychanego natężenia, a 14-dniowa noc mroźniejszą niż nasze zimy podbiegunowe, będziemy mieli obraz kraju wcale nie zachęcającego do obrania go sobie za stałe miejsce pobytu. Tem więcej podziwiać trzeba poświęcenie ludzi, którzy z narażeniem własnego życia wybrali się na ten glob, w tem jedynie celu, aby powiększyć zasób ludzkiej wiedzy, nie ulegającymi wątpliwości wiadomościami o najbliższym Ziemi ciele niebieskiem. Podróżnicy mieli zresztą zamiar przebyć tylko jak najprędzej tę niegościnną półkulę i dostać się na drugą, od Ziemi odwróconą stronę Księżyca, gdzie spodziewali się nie bezpodstawnie znaleźć znośne warunki do życia. Większość piszących o Księżycu uczonych twierdzi wprawdzie, że i na tamtej stronie atmosfera jest zbyt rzadka, aby można nią oddychać. Wszakże Otamor, opierając się na wieloletnich badaniach i obliczeniach, wnosił, że znajdzie tam powietrze o dostatecznej gęstości dla utrzymania życia, a z powietrzem wodę i roślinność, mogącą dostarczyć najlichszego bodaj pożywienia. Ci śmiali ludzie gotowi zresztą byli nawet na śmierć, byle wydrzeć przedtem gwiaździstemu niebu bodaj jednę z jego tajemnic, które tak zazdrośnie ukrywa przed człowiekiem. Odwagę ich podnosiła myśl, że poświęcenie to w żadnym razie nie pozostanie bezowocnem, gdyż będą mogli spostrzeżeń swych udzielić pozostałym na ziemi ludziom przy pomocy wziętego ze sobą telegraficznego aparatu. A nuż, myśleli czasem upojeni wielkością swego przedsięwzięcia, nuż znajdą na tamtej tajemniczej stronie księżyca raj czarodziejski i dziwny, świat nowy, zgoła odmienny od ziemskiego, a gościnny. Marzyli tedy o wezwaniu nowych towarzyszy do przebycia owych setek tysięcy kilometrów, o założeniu tam, na tej jasnej, ziemi w ciche noce świecącej kuli, nowego społeczeństwa, nowej ludzkości, szczęśliwszej może. Tymczasem trzeba się było liczyć z koniecznością przebycia górzystej, bezpowietrznej i bezwodnej pustynnej wyżyny, zajmującej całą ku ziemi zwróconą półkulę księżyca. Nie było to drobnostką. Obwód księżyca wynosi blisko 11 tysięcy kilometrów. Gdyby zatem upadli, jak się spodziewali, na środek ku ziemi zwróconej tarczy, mieliby do zrobienia około 3 co najmniej tysięcy kilometrów, nimby się dostali w okolice, gdzie mieli nadzieję móc oddychać i żyć. Pocisk kształtu wydłużonego, z jednej strony stożkowo zakończonego cylindra, był też odpowiednio urządzony, aby go można było zamienić na pewien rodzaj zamkniętego automobilu i zaopatrzony obficie w zapasy zagęszczonego powietrza, wody, żywności i paliwa, mogące wystarczyć dla 5 osób na cały rok, to jest nawet na dłużej niż potrzeba dla dostania się na odwrotną stronę księżyca. Oprócz tego wzięli z sobą podróżnicy znaczną liczbę różnych narzędzi, małą biblioteczkę i sukę z dwojgiem szczeniąt. Była to piękna i wielka angielska wyżlica, należąca do Tomasza Woodbella, którą przed puszczeniem się w drogę ochrzczono zgodnie mianem Seleny. Te wszystkie rzeczy przypomniał szczegółowo memoriał asystenta w K, mający służyć za objaśnienie do wydanego wkrótce potem rękopisu. Rękopis sam, spisany po polsku na Księżycu przez Jana Koreckiego, uczestnika pierwszej wyprawy, składał się z 3 części, powstałych w różnych czasach, a wiążących się ze sobą w organiczną całość, stanowiącą opowieść o przedziwnych losach i przejściach rozbitka wyrzuconego na ląd zawieszony w błękicie 384 miliony metrów nad ziemią. A oto przedruk dosłowny owego rękopisu, według pierwszego wydania, sporządzonego przez asystenta obserwatorium w K. End of na srebrnym globie, Chapter 1.
Oliver Twist, Chapter 1, treats of the place where Oliver Twist was born, and of the circumstances attending his birth. By Charles Dickens. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Bruce Kachuk. Among other public buildings in a certain town, which for many reasons it will be prudent to refrain from mentioning, and to which I will assign no fictitious name, there is one anciently common to most towns, great or small, to wit, a workhouse. And in this workhouse was born, on a day and date which I need not trouble myself to repeat, inasmuch as it can be of no possible consequence to the reader, in this stage of the business at all events, the item of mortality whose name is prefixed to the head of this chapter. For a long time after it was ushered into this world of sorrow and trouble by the parish surgeon, it remained a matter of considerable doubt whether the child would survive to bear any name at all, in which case it is somewhat more than probable that these memoirs would never have appeared, or if they had, that being comprised within a couple of pages, they would have possessed the inestimable merit of being the most concise and faithful specimen of biography extant in the literature of any age or country. Although I am not disposed to maintain that being born in a workhouse is in itself the most fortunate and enviable circumstance that can possibly befall a human being, I do mean to say that in this particular instance it was the best thing for Oliver Twist that could by possibility have occurred. The fact is that there was considerable difficulty in inducing Oliver to take upon himself the office of respiration, a troublesome practice, but one which custom has rendered necessary to our easy existence, and for some time he lay gasping on a little flock mattress, rather unequally poised between this world and the next, the balance being decidedly in favor of the latter. Now if, during this brief period, Oliver had been surrounded by careful grandmothers, anxious aunts, experienced nurses, and doctors of profound wisdom, he would most inevitably and indubitably have been killed in no time. There being nobody by, however, but a pauper old woman, who was rendered rather misty by an unwonted allowance of beer, and a parish surgeon who did such matters by contract, Oliver and nature fought out the point between them. The result was that after a few struggles, Oliver breathed, sneezed, and proceeded to advertise to the inmates of the workhouse the fact of a new burden having been imposed upon the parish, by setting up as loud a cry as could reasonably have been expected from a male infant who had not been possessed of that very useful appendage, a voice, for a much longer space of time than 3 minutes and a quarter. As Oliver gave this first proof of the free and proper action of his lungs, the patchwork coverlet, which was carelessly flung over the iron bedstead, rustled. The pale face of a young woman was raised feebly from the pillow, and a faint voice imperfectly articulated the words, "Let me see the child, and die." The surgeon had been sitting with his face turned towards the fire, giving the palms of his hands a warm and a rub alternately. As the young woman spoke, he rose, and advancing to the bed's head, said, with more kindness than might have been expected of him, "Oh, you must not talk about dying yet." "Lord bless her dear heart, no," interposed the nurse, hastily depositing in her pocket a green glass bottle, the contents of which she had been tasting in a corner with evident satisfaction. "Lord bless her dear heart, when she has lived as long as I have, sir, and had 13 children of her own, and all on 'em dead except 2, and them in the workus with me, she'll know better than to take on in that way. Bless her dear heart. Think what it is to be a mother. There's a dear young lamb, do." Apparently this consolatory perspective of a mother's prospects failed in producing its due effect. The patient shook her head and stretched out her hand towards the child. The surgeon deposited it in her arms. She imprinted her cold white lips passionately on its forehead, passed her hands over her face, gazed wildly round, shuddered, fell back, and died. They chafed her breast, hands, and temples, but the blood had stopped forever. They talked of hope and comfort. They had been strangers too long. "It's all over, Mrs. Thingamy," said the surgeon at last. "Ah, poor dear, so it is," said the nurse, picking up the cork of the green bottle, which had fallen out on the pillow, as she stooped to take up the child. "Poor dear." "You needn't mind sending up to me if the child cries, nurse," said the surgeon, putting on his gloves with great deliberation. "It's very likely it will be troublesome. Give it a little gruel if it is." He put on his hat, and pausing by the bedside on his way to the door, added, "She was a good-looking girl, too. Where did she come from?" "She was brought here last night," replied the old woman, "by the overseer's order. She was found lying in the street. She had walked some distance, for her shoes were worn to pieces. But where she came from, or where she was going to, nobody knows." The surgeon leaned over the body and raised the left hand. "The old story," he said, shaking his head. "No wedding ring, I see. Ah, good night." The medical gentleman walked away to dinner, and the nurse, having once more applied herself to the green bottle, sat down on a low chair before the fire, and proceeded to dress the infant. What an excellent example of the power of dress young Oliver Twist was! Wrapped in the blanket which had hitherto formed his only covering, he might have been the child of a nobleman or a beggar. It would have been hard for the haughtiest stranger to have assigned him his proper station in society. But now that he was enveloped in the old calico robes which had grown yellow in the same service, he was badged and ticketed, and fell into his place at once. a parish child, the orphan of a workhouse, the humble, half-starved drudge, to be cuffed and buffeted through the world, despised by all, and pitied by none. Oliver cried lustily. If he could have known that he was an orphan, left to the tender mercies of church wardens and overseers, perhaps he would have cried the louder. End of Oliver Twist, Chapter 1. Treats of the place where Oliver Twist was born, and of the circumstances attending his birth, by Charles Dickens.
The Book of Moses, Chapter 1, of the Pearl of Great Price by Joseph Smith. This is the Librivox Coin. Our Librivox coins are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Recording by Glenn O'Brien, www.glennobrien.net. The Book of Moses, Chapter 1. The words of God, which he spake unto Moses at the time when Moses was caught up into an exceedingly high mountain, and he saw God face to face, and he talked with him. And the glory of God was upon Moses, therefore Moses could endure his presence. And God spake unto Moses, saying, Behold, I am the Lord God Almighty, and endless is my name, for I am without beginning of days or end of years, and is not this endless? And behold, thou art my son. Wherefore look, and I will show thee the worship of mine hands, but not all, for my works are without end, and also my words, for they never cease. Wherefore no man can behold all my works, except he behold all my glory, and no man can behold all my glory and afterwards remain in flesh on the earth. And I have worked for thee, Moses my son, and thou art in the similitude of mine only begotten, and mine only begotten is and shall be the Saviour, for he is full of grace and truth. But there is no God beside me, and all things are present with me, for I know them all. And now behold, this one thing I show unto thee, Moses my son, for thou art in the world, and now I show it unto thee. And it came to pass that Moses looked, and beheld the world upon which he was created, and Moses beheld the world and the ends thereof, and all the children of men which are and which were created, of the same he greatly marvelled and wondered. And the presence of God withdrew from Moses, that his glory was not upon Moses, and Moses was swept unto himself. And as he was swept unto himself, he fell unto the earth. And it came to pass that it was for the space of many hours before Moses did again receive his natural strength, like unto man. And he said unto himself, Now for this cause I know that man is nothing, which thing I never have supposed. But now mine own eyes have beheld God, but not my natural, but my spiritual eyes. For my natural eyes could not have beheld, for I should have withered and died in his presence. But his glory was upon me, and I beheld his face, for I was transfigured before him. And it came to pass that when Moses had said these words, behold, Satan came tempting him, saying, Moses, son of man, worship me. And it came to pass that Moses looked upon Satan, and said, Who art thou? For behold, I am a son of God, in the similitude of his only begotten. And where is thy glory, that I should worship thee? For behold, I cannot look upon God, except his glory should come upon me, and I was shamed before him. But I can look upon thee in the natural man. Is it not so surely? Blessed be the name of my God, for his spirit hath not altogether withdrawn from me. Or else where is thy glory? For it is darkness unto me. And I can judge between thee and God, for God said unto me, Worship God, for him only shalt thou serve. Get thee hence, Satan, deceive me not. For God said unto me, Thou art after the similitude of mine only begotten. And he also gave me commandments when he called unto me out of the burning bush, saying, Call unto God in the name of mine only begotten, and worship me. And again Moses said, I will not cease to call upon God, I have other things to inquire of him, for his glory has been upon me, wherefore I can judge between him and thee. Depart hence, Satan. And now, when Moses had said these words, Satan cried with a loud voice, and went upon the earth, and commanded, saying, I am the only begotten, worship me. And it came to pass that Moses began to fear exceedingly, and as he began to fear, he saw the bitterness of hell. Nevertheless, calling upon God, he received strength, and he commanded, saying, Depart from me, Satan, for this one God only will I worship, which is the God of glory. And now Satan began to tremble, and the earth shook. And Moses received strength, and called upon God, saying, In the name of the only begotten, depart hence, Satan. And it came to pass that Satan cried with a loud voice, with weeping, and wailing, and gnashing of teeth. And he departed hence, even from the presence of Moses, that he beheld him not. And now of this thing Moses bore record, but because of wickedness it is not had among the children of men. And it came to pass that when Satan had departed from the presence of Moses, that Moses lifted up his eyes unto heaven, being filled with the Holy Ghost, which beareth record of the Father and the Son. And calling upon the name of God, he beheld his glory again, for it was upon him. And he heard a voice saying, Blessed art thou, Moses, for I the Almighty have chosen thee, and thou shalt be made stronger than any waters, for they shall obey thy command as if thou wert God. And lo, I am with thee, even unto the end of thy days, for thou shalt deliver my people from bondage, even Israel my chosen. And it came to pass, as the voice was still speaking, Moses cast his eyes and beheld the earth, yea, even all of it, and there was no particle of it which he did not behold, discerned by the Spirit of God. And he beheld also the inhabitants thereof, and there was no soul which he beheld not. And he discovered them by the Spirit of God, and then none so great, even numberless, as the sand upon the sea shore. And he beheld many lands, and each land was called earth, and there were inhabitants on the face thereof. And it came to pass that Moses called upon God, saying, Tell me, I pray thee, why these things are so, and by what thou madest them. And behold, the glory of the Lord was upon Moses, so that Moses stood in the presence of God, and talked with him face to face. And the Lord God said unto Moses, For mine own purpose have I made these things. Here is wisdom, and it remaineth in me. And by the word of my power have I created them, which is mine only begotten Son, who is full of grace and truth. And worlds without number have I created, and I also created them for mine own purpose, and by the Son I created them, which is mine only begotten. And the first man of all men have I called Adam, which is many. But only in account of this earth and the inhabitants thereof give I unto you. For behold, there are many worlds that have passed away by the word of my power. And there are many that now stand, and innumerable are they unto man. But all things are numbered unto me, for they are mine, and I know them. And it came to pass that Moses spake unto the Lord, saying, Be merciful unto thy servant, O God, and tell me concerning this earth, and the inhabitants thereof, and also the heavens, and then thy servant will be content. And the Lord God spake unto Moses, saying, The heavens, they are many, and they cannot be numbered unto man, but they are numbered unto me, for they are mine. And as one earth shall pass away, and the heavens thereof, even so shall another come. And there is no end to my works, neither to my words. For behold, this is my work and my glory, to bring to pass the immortality and the eternal life of man. And now, Moses my son, I will speak unto thee concerning this earth upon which thou standest, and thou shalt write the things which I shall speak. And in a day when the children of men shall esteem my words as naught, and take many of them from the book which thou shalt write, behold, I will raise up another like unto thee, and they shall be added again among the children of men, among as many as shall believe. These words were spoken unto Moses in the mount, the name of which shall not be known among the children of men. And now they are spoken unto you. Show them not unto any except them that believe. Even so. Amen. End of the Book of Moses, Chapter 1, of the Pearl of Great Price, by Joseph Smith.
Rainbow Valley, Chapter 1, Home Again, by Lucy Mudd Montgomery. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. It was a clear apple-green evening in May, and Four Winds Harbour was mirroring back the clouds of the golden west between its softly dark shores. The sea moaned eerily on the sandbar, sorrowful even in spring, but a sly, jovial wind came piping down the red harbour road, along which Miss Cornelia's comfortable, matronly figure was making its way towards the village of Glen St. Mary. Miss Cornelia was rightfully Mrs. Marshall Elliott, and had been Mrs. Marshall Elliott for 13 years, but even yet more people referred to her as Miss Cornelia than as Mrs. Elliott. The old name was dear to her old friends, only one of them contemptuously dropped it. Susan Baker, the grey and grim and faithful handmaiden of the Blythe family at Ingleside, never lost an opportunity of calling her Mrs. Marshall Elliott, with the most killing and pointed emphasis, as if to say, "You wanted to be Mrs., and Mrs. you shall be with a vengeance, as far as I am concerned." Miss Cornelia was going up to Ingleside to see Dr. and Mrs. Blythe, who were just home from Europe. They had been away for 3 months, having left in February to attend a famous medical congress in London, and certain things, which Miss Cornelia was anxious to discuss, had taken place in the Glen during their absence. For one thing, there was a new family in the manse, and such a family! Miss Cornelia shook her head over them several times as she walked briskly along. Susan Baker and the Anne Shirley of other days saw her coming, as they sat on the big veranda at Ingleside, enjoying the charm of the cat's light, the sweetness of sleepy robins whistling among the twilit maples, and the dance of a gusty group of daffodils blowing against the old mellow red brick wall of the lawn. Anne was sitting on the steps, her hands clasped over her knee, looking, in the kind dusk, as girlish as a mother of many has any right to be, and the beautiful grey-green eyes, gazing down the harbour road, were as full of unquenchable sparkle and dream as ever. Behind her, in the hammock, Rilla Blythe was curled up, a fat, roly-poly little creature of 6 years, the youngest of the Ingleside children. She had curly red hair and hazel eyes that were now buttoned up after the funny wrinkled fashion in which Rilla always went to sleep. Shirley, the little brown boy, as he was known in the family Who's Who, was asleep in Susan's arms. He was brown-haired, brown-eyed, and brown-skinned, with very rosy cheeks, and he was Susan's especial love. After his birth Anne had been very ill for a long time, and Susan mothered the baby with a passionate tenderness which none of the other children, dear as they were to her, had ever called out. Dr. Blythe had said that but for her he would never have lived. "I gave him life just as much as you did, Mrs. Doctor dear," Susan was wont to say. "He is just as much my baby as he is yours." And indeed, it was always to Susan that Shirley ran to be kissed for bumps, and rocked to sleep, and protected from well-deserved spankings. Susan had conscientiously spanked all the other Blythe children when she thought they needed it for their souls' good, but she would not spank Shirley, nor allow his mother to do it. Once Dr. Blythe had spanked him, and Susan had been stormily indignant. "That man would spank an angel, Mrs. Doctor dear, that he would," she had declared bitterly, and she would not make the poor doctor a pie for weeks. She had taken Shirley with her to her brother's home during his parents' absence, while all the other children had gone to Avonlea, and she had 3 blessed months of him all to herself. Nevertheless, Susan was very glad to find herself back at Ingleside, with all her darlings around her again. Ingleside was her world, and in it she reigned supreme. Even Anne seldom questioned her decisions, much to the disgust of Mrs. Rachel Lynde of Green Gables, who gloomily told Anne, whenever she visited Four Winds, that she was letting Susan get to be entirely too much of a boss, and would live to rue it. "Here's Cornelia Bryant coming up the harbour road, Mrs. Doctor dear," said Susan. "She will be coming up to unload 3 months' gossip on us." "I hope so," said Anne, hugging her knees. "I'm starving for Glen St. Mary gossip, Susan. I hope Miss Cornelia can tell me everything that has happened while we've been away, everything. Who has got born or married or drunk, who has died or gone away, or come or fought, or lost a cow, or found a beau. It's so delightful to be home again with all the dear Glen folks, and I want to know all about them. Why, I remember wondering, as I walked through Westminster Abbey, which of her two especial beaux Millicent Drew would finally marry. Do you know, Susan, I have a dreadful suspicion that I love gossip." "Well, of course, Mrs. Dr. dear," admitted Susan. "Every proper woman likes to hear the news. I am rather interested in Millicent Drew's case myself. I never had a beau, much less two, and I do not mind now, for being an old maid does not hurt when you get used to it. Millicent's hair always looks to me as if she had swept it up with a broom. But the men do not seem to mind that. They see only her pretty, piquant, mocking little face, Susan." "That may very well be, Mrs. Dr. dear. The good book says that favour is deceitful and beauty is vain, but I should not have minded finding that out for myself, if it had been so ordained. I have no doubt we will all be beautiful when we are angels, but what good will it do us then? Speaking of gossip, however, they do say that poor Mrs. Harrison Miller over harbour tried to hang herself last week." "Oh, Susan!" "Calm yourself, Mrs. Dr. dear. She did not succeed. But I really do not blame her for trying, for her husband is a terrible man. But she was very foolish to think of hanging herself and leaving the way clear for him to marry some other woman. If I had been in her shoes, Mrs. Dr. dear, I would have gone to work to worry him so that he would try to hang himself instead of me. Not that I hold with people hanging themselves under any circumstances, Mrs. Dr. dear." "What is the matter with Harrison Miller, anyway?" said Anne impatiently. "He is always driving someone to extremes." "Well, some people call it religion, and some call it cussedness, begging your pardon, Mrs. Dr. dear, for using such a word. It seems they cannot make out which it is in Harrison's case. There are days when he growls at everybody because he thinks he is foreordained to eternal punishment. And then there are days when he says he does not care and goes and gets drunk. My own opinion is that he is not sound in his intellect, for none of that branch of the Millers were. His grandfather went out of his mind. He thought he was surrounded by big black spiders. They crawled over him and floated in the air about him. I hope I shall never go insane, Mrs. Dr. dear, and I do not think I will, because it is not a habit of the Bakers. But if an all-wise Providence should decree it, I hope it will not take the form of big black spiders, for I loathe the animals. As for Mrs. Miller, I do not know whether she really deserves pity or not. There are some who say she just married Harrison to spite Richard Taylor, which seems to me a very peculiar reason for getting married. But then, of course, I am no judge of things matrimonial, Mrs. Dr. dear. And there is Cornelia Bryant at the gate, so I will put this blessed brown baby on his bed and get my knitting. End of Rainbow Valley, Chapter 1, Home Again, by Lucy Maud Montgomery. Recording by Rachel. The Secret Garden, Chapter 1, There is No One Left, by Frances Hodgson Burnett. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Rachel. When Mary Lennox was sent to Misselthwaite Manor to live with her uncle, everybody said she was the most disagreeable-looking child ever seen. It was true, too. She had a little thin face and a little thin body, thin light hair, and a sour expression. Her hair was yellow, and her face was yellow, because she had been born in India, and had always been ill in one way or another. Her father held a position under the English government, and had always been busy and ill himself, and her mother had been a great beauty, who cared only to go to parties and amuse herself with gay people. She had not wanted a little girl at all, and when Mary was born she handed her over to the care of an ayah, who was made to understand that if she wished to please the Mem Sahib, she must keep the child out of sight as much as possible. So when she was a sickly, fretful, ugly little baby, she was kept out of the way, and when she became a sickly, fretful, toddling thing, she was kept out of the way also. She never remembered seeing familiarly anything but the dark faces of her ayah and the other native servants, and as they always obeyed her and gave her her own way in everything, because the Mem Sahib would be angry if she was disturbed by her crying, by the time she was 6 years old she was as tyrannical and selfish a little pig as ever lived. The young English governess who came to teach her to read and write disliked her so much that she gave up her place in 3 months, and when other governesses came to try to fill it, they always went away in a shorter time than the first one. So if Mary had not chosen to really want to know how to read books, she would never have learned her letters at all. One frightfully hot morning, when she was about 9 years old, she awakened feeling very cross, and she became crosser still when she saw that the servant who stood by her bedside was not her ayah. "Why did you come?" she said to the strange woman. "I will not let you stay. Send my ayah to me." The woman looked frightened, but she only stammered that the ayah could not come, and when Mary threw herself into a passion and beat and kicked her, she only looked more frightened and repeated that it was not possible for the ayah to come to Missie Sahib. There was something mysterious in the air that morning. Nothing was done in its regular order, and several of the native servants seemed missing, while those Mary saw slunk or hurried about with ashy and scared faces. But no one would tell her anything, and her ayah did not come. She was actually left alone as the morning went on, and at last she wandered out into the garden and began to play by herself under a tree near the veranda. She pretended that she was making a flower bed, and she stuck big scarlet hibiscus blossoms into little heaps of earth, all the time growing more and more angry and muttering to herself the things she would say and the names she would call Sadie when she returned. "Pig, pig, daughter of pigs," she said, because to call a native a pig is the worst insult of all. She was grinding her teeth and saying this over and over again when she heard her mother come out on the veranda with someone. She was with a fair young man, and they stood talking together in low, strange voices. Mary knew the fair young man who looked like a boy. She had heard that he was a very young officer who had just come from England. The child stared at him, but she stared most at her mother. She always did this when she had a chance to see her, because the Mem Sahib, Mary used to call her that oftener than anything else, was such a tall, slim, pretty person, and wore such lovely clothes. Her hair was like curly silk, and she had a delicate little nose which seemed to be disdaining things, and she had large laughing eyes. All her clothes were thin and floating, and Mary said they were full of lace. They looked fuller of lace than ever this morning, but her eyes were not laughing at all. They were large and scared, and lifted imploringly to the fair boy officer's face. "Is it so very bad? Oh, is it?" Mary heard her say. "Awfully," the young man answered in a trembling voice. "Awfully, Mrs. Lennox. You ought to have gone to the hills 2 weeks ago." The Mem Sahib wrung her hands. "Oh, I know I ought," she cried. "I only stayed to go to that silly dinner party. What a fool I was!" At that very moment such a loud sound of wailing broke out from the servants' quarters that she clutched the young man's arm, and Mary stood shivering from head to foot. The wailing grew wilder and wilder. "What is it? What is it?" Mrs. Lennox gasped. "Someone has died," answered the boy officer. "You did not say it had broken out among your servants." "I did not know," the Mem Sahib cried. "Come with me, come with me," and she turned and ran into the house. After that appalling things happened, and the mysteriousness of the morning was explained to Mary. The cholera had broken out in its most fatal form, and people were dying like flies. The ayah had been taken ill in the night, and it was because she had just died that the servants had wailed in the huts. Before the next day 3 other servants were dead, and others had run away in terror. There was panic on every side, and dying people in all the bungalows. During the confusion and bewilderment of the second day, Mary hid herself in the nursery and was forgotten by everyone. Nobody thought of her, nobody wanted her, and strange things happened of which she knew nothing. Mary alternately cried and slept through the hours. She only knew that people were ill, and that she heard mysterious and frightening sounds. Once she crept into the dining room and found it empty, though a partly finished meal was on the table, and chairs and plates looked as if they had been hastily pushed back when the diners rose suddenly for some reason. The child ate some fruit and biscuits, and being thirsty she drank a glass of wine which stood nearly filled. It was sweet, and she did not know how strong it was. Very soon it made her intensely drowsy, and she went back to her nursery and shut herself in, frightened by cries she heard in the huts, and by the hurrying sound of feet. The wine made her so sleepy that she could scarcely keep her eyes open, and she lay down on her bed and knew nothing more for a long time. Many things happened during the hours in which she slept so heavily, but she was not disturbed by the wails and the sound of things being carried in and out of the bungalow. When she awakened she lay and stared at the wall. The house was perfectly still. She had never known it to be so silent before. She heard neither voices nor footsteps, and wondered if everybody had got well of the cholera, and all the trouble was over. She wondered also who would take care of her now her ayah was dead. There would be a new ayah, and perhaps she would know some new stories. Mary had been rather tired of the old ones. She did not cry because her nurse had died. She was not an affectionate child, and had never cared much for anyone. The noise and hurrying about and wailing over the cholera had frightened her, and she had been angry because no one seemed to remember that she was alive. Everyone was too panic-stricken to think of a little girl no one was fond of. When people had the cholera it seemed that they remembered nothing but themselves. But if everyone had got well again, surely someone would remember and come to look for her. But no one came, and as she lay waiting, the house seemed to grow more and more silent. She heard something rustling on the matting, and when she looked down she saw a little snake gliding along and watching her with eyes like jewels. She was not frightened, because he was a harmless little thing who would not hurt her, and he seemed in a hurry to get out of the room. He slipped under the door as she watched him. "How queer and quiet it is," she said. "It sounds as if there were no one in the bungalow but me and the snake." Almost the next minute she heard footsteps in the compound, and then on the veranda. They were men's footsteps, and the men entered the bungalow and talked in low voices. No one went to meet or speak to them, and they seemed to open doors and look into rooms. "What desolation!" she heard one voice say. "That pretty, pretty woman! I suppose the child, too. I heard there was a child, though no one ever saw her." Mary was standing in the middle of the nursery when they opened the door a few minutes later. She looked an ugly, cross little thing, and was frowning because she was beginning to be hungry and feel disgracefully neglected. The first man who came in was a large officer she had once seen talking to her father. He looked tired and troubled, but when he saw her he was so startled that he almost jumped back. "Barney!" he cried out. "There is a child here! A child alone! In a place like this! Mercy on us, who is she?" "I am Mary Lennox," the little girl said, drawing herself up stiffly. She thought the man was very rude to call her father's bungalow a place like this. "I fell asleep when everyone had the cholera, and I have only just wakened up. Why does nobody come?" "It is the child no one ever saw," exclaimed the man, turning to his companions. "She has actually been forgotten." "Why was I forgotten?" Mary said, stamping her foot. "Why does nobody come?" The young man, whose name was Barney, looked at her very sadly. Mary even thought she saw him wink his eyes, as if to wink tears away. "Poor little kid," he said. "There is nobody left to come." It was in that strange and sudden way that Mary found out that she had neither father nor mother left, that they had died and were carried away in the night, and that the few native servants who had not died also had left the house as quickly as they could get out of it, none of them even remembering that there was a Missy Sahib. That was why the place was so quiet. It was true that there was no one else in the bungalow but herself and the little rustling snake. End of The Secret Garden, Chapter 1, There is No One Left, by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Recording by Rachel.
Saying the Contract and What It Cost. Chapter 1, A Wanderer, by Martha Finlay. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Read by Bria Snow. Lost, lost, lost. The sun had set amid angry clouds. Deep shadows already filled the recesses of the forest through which the iron horse went thundering on its way, while an icy wind, bringing with it frequent dashes of rain and sleet, swept through the leafless branches of the trees, tossing them wildly against a dull leaden sky. A lady, gazing out into the gathering gloom, started with a sudden exclamation of surprise and dismay. Her husband leaned hastily past her to see what had called it forth. Then, with a smile at his own folly in forgetting that at the rate of speed with which they were moving, the object, whatever it might be, was already out of sight, settled himself back again, bending a look of mild inquiry upon her agitated countenance. She shivered, and drawing her shawl more closely about her, put her lips to his ear, that she might be heard above the noise of the train. It was a face, John, a woman's face upturned to the sky, wan, distressed, wretched, with great sorrowful eyes. It just gleamed out upon me for an instant as we swept by, and was gone. Poor thing, she must be in sore trouble. He only shook his head with a smile of conscious superiority of wisdom. Don't let your imagination run away with you, my dear, nor waste your sympathy upon a wandering gipsy who would not exchange places with you if you could. The train was slackening in speed, and they could now converse with ease. She is no ordinary tramp, was the quick, earnest reply, and if ever bitter, hopeless grief and despair were written on a human face, they were on hers. I wish we could go back and find her. Quite impossible, Dolly, so let us talk of something more agreeable. We change cars soon, don't we? She asked. Worse than that. We get out at the next station and wait there 2 mortal hours for another train. Clearfield Station! Shouted the conductor, throwing open the car door. An acre or 2 of ground had been cleared of trees, though many of the stumps were still standing. There was no appearance of a town, only a depot and a few shanties scattered here and there, the whole hemmed in by the forest, except on the 2 sides where the road had cut its way through. The train stopped, and John and Dolly, otherwise Mr. and Mrs. Kemper, alighted, and the gentleman hurried his wife out of the rain and sleet into the depot. A very forlorn place it looked, with its rusty stove, filthy floor and windows, and hard straight-backed wooden chairs and settee, which gave small promise of rest or ease to the delayed and weary traveller. What a wretched hole, said Mrs. Kemper, sending a rueful glance from side to side. How long did you say we'd have to stay here, John? 2 hours, Dolly. Here, take this chair by the fire, and I'll go and see what can be done. He came back presently, and pointing through the window, You see that light yonder, Dolly? He said. It comes from a shanty some 100 yards away, where they tell me we can at least find cleanliness and a cup of hot tea. There seems to be a lull in the storm at this moment, too. Shall we go and try it? By all means, she answered, rising with alacrity and taking his offered arm. I presume the walking is bad enough, but my boots are thick. Picking their way carefully between stumps and pools of water just visible in the deepening gloom, they reached the place. It was a long, low building of ruder structure, its walls rough boards nailed on horizontally, leaving large cracks between, with merely a covering of painted canvas upon the outside to keep wind and rain at bay. The gable end, with its one door and window, in which burned the lamp that had guided them, faced the road. Entering, our travellers found themselves in a small waiting room, very simply furnished, but invitingly warm, clean, and tidy. A neatly dressed young woman greeted them with a pleasant "Good evening," and throwing open an inner door asked if they would walk out to supper. "I should prefer just taking something here," said Mrs. Kemper, shrinking back at the sight of a long table with only a number of rough-looking men about it. "Couldn't you bring me a cup of hot tea and whatever you have to eat?" "Yes, ma'am, of course." And the girl vanished, to return presently with the tea, a piece of steak, bread, butter, and hot corn cakes. Out in the forest a woman was battling with the storm, a woman with a child in her arms. A slight willowy form was hers, once the perfection of grace in outline and movement, now bent and staggering with weakness. A face whose bright soft eyes, glowing cheeks, and ruby lips were not long ago the admiration or envy of many, though now wan and pinched with famine and wasting sickness. It was the same face that Mrs. Kemper had seen from the car window, upturned despairingly to the stormy sky for a moment as the weary wanderer paused and leaned against the tree by the roadside to gather strength and breath for renewed exertion. Both were well nigh spent, and hope so nearly dead within her that, but for the babe in her arms, she had laid down to die there in the lonely wood, with no human creature near to pity or console. But mother love was stronger than the love of life. She had taken the thin faded shawl from her own shoulders to wrap it about the little one, and so had kept it comparatively warm and dry, while she herself was drenched to the skin. Her limbs were almost benumbed with cold, and the cutting wind, as it dashed the rain and sleet full in her face, seemed piercing to her very vitals. Twilight was fast deepening into night. The way grew dark and slippery. Now her feet sank in the mud, and she struggled out only to slip into a pool of water, or to stumble and fall over a stump or log, or to catch and tear her clothing on some thorny bush. The pauses for breath grew more frequent, the steps, as she moved forward again, weaker and more tottering. The weary arms could scarce sustain the weight of the child, and she knew not how far distant was the nearest human habitation. She was about to give up in utter despair, when the gleam of a not very distant light, seen through the trees, inspired her with new hope and energy. She pressed forward, and presently emerged from the wood, and found herself at Clearfield Station, with the light in the window of the shanty inn shining out ruddily not 100 yards away. She crept to the door and knocked faintly. Mr. Kemper, who had just finished his supper, rose and opened it. "Come in," he said. "This is a public house, and I presume no one will object," he added, catching sight of the ragged, dripping figure. She stepped in, staggered to the fire, and dropped down on the floor beside it. "Drunk," he muttered, with a gesture of disgust. "No, no, John, she is ill, starving perhaps, poor thing, cried his keener-sighted wife, springing forward, barely in time to catch the sleeping babe as the weary arms relaxed their hold, and the wanderer sank back against the wall in a state of semi-insensibility, her eyes closed and not a trace of colour on cheek or lip. "She's dying!" exclaimed Mr. Kemper in a frightened whisper, and rushing to the inner door, "Somebody run for a doctor, quick! Here is a woman who seems to be very ill," he cried hurriedly. "None to be had within 3 or 4 mile," returned a gruff voice from the table. "What ails the woman? Who is she?" "I don't know, but something must be done." "Give her a cup of your tea, Irene," said the voice. "A few drops of brandy from the flask in our luncheon basket, John," said his wife. "I always take it along in case of sickness, you know." But the child, a girl of 18 months, woke with a cry, "Mamma, Mamma," and at the sound the mother's eyes unclosed. "Give her to me, my little Ethel," she said faintly. "You are ill, my good woman, not able to hold her," Mrs. Kemper said, as she reluctantly complied with the request. "Yes, and I have eaten nothing to-day, and have walked many miles." "Poor soul!" exclaimed Irene, the kind-hearted mistress of the shanty, coming in with the tea. "Here, drink this, and I'll bring you some supper. You look more dead than alive, and the rain has been soaking you through and through. Dear, dear, you'll catch your death of cold." She raised the wanderer's head as she spoke, and held the cup to her lips. It was eagerly drained to the last drop, and seemed to revive the poor creature greatly. Food was brought, and the babe devoured it as if half famished, but the mother ate sparingly. She was evidently very ill, almost dying, thought those about her, and hastened to do all in their power for her relief and comfort. Plainly she was, as Mrs. Kemper had said, no common tramp. There was a ladylike refinement in face, voice, and manner. Her accent was pure, her speech correct, and even elegant, as, in answer to kindly inquiries, she gave a brief account of the causes of her present sad condition. At an early age she had been left an orphan and without any natural protector, had married some 3 years ago, and 2 years later her husband had died, leaving her penniless, in feeble health, and with a babe to support. She had managed for a time to earn a scanty living by needlework, but there was little demand for it where she lived, and wages were very low, so, taking her child in her arms, she had set out in search of other employment or a better location. It had proved a long weary quest, and here she was, in utter destitution, and about, she greatly feared, to die, and leave her helpless babe with none to love and care for it. With the last words a great sob burst from her bosom, and clasping the little creature close, my darling, my little Ethel, if I might but take you with me," she moaned in anguish. "Ah, now, don't take on so," Irene said kindly. "You'll be better to-morrow. Walking all day in the cold, and getting wet too, it's no wonder you're downhearted like. But cheer up, you'll get over it and find work, and maybe see as good days as ever you did." The wanderer thanked her with a grateful look, as she continued silently to caress Ethel, the child, no longer cold and hungry, hanging about her mother's neck, stroking her face lovingly and prattling in innocent glee. Mrs. Kemper watched her with delighted longing eyes, the tears starting to them once and again. "What a lovely darling little creature she is," she whispered to her husband. "Just the age our Nellie was." And then she added a few words in a still lower tone. He nodded acquiescence, and turning to the mother, said that he and his wife would like to adopt the child and bring it up as their own, that they would do so if she would at once give it up entirely to them. A look of mingled grief and terror came over her face at the bare suggestion. She clutched her treasure in a death-like grasp. "No, no! How could I? How could I?" she cried. "My baby, my precious baby, my all! No, no! Never, never!" "Take time to consider," he said soothingly. "I am sorry to distress you, but as you yourself have said, your child will soon need another protector, and it is very unlikely that another will be readily found to do as well by her as we would." "But wait till I am gone," she moaned. "She is my all, my all! Oh, 'tis hard to die and leave her. My baby, my baby! Your mother's heart will break." And the tears fell like rain on the wondering little face upturned to hers. "Don't cry, Ethel's mamma. Ethel love oo," cooed the baby, lifting her dress to wipe away the tears, while with the other arm she clung about her neck, then kissing her wet cheek again and again. Mrs. Kemper, with great tears of sympathy rolling down her own cheeks, knelt at the wanderer's side, and taking one thin hand in hers, said, "I feel for you, my poor, poor friend. I do indeed. I know a mother's heart, for I once had a little one like this, and when death snatched her from me I would gladly have gone down into the grave with her, for she was my only one. That was 10 years ago. I have never had another, and it is not likely I ever shall. And now, when you feel that you must leave this darling, will you not let me have her to fill the vacant place in my heart, in our hearts and home? For my husband will love her dearly too, and be a good father to her. Oh, gladly, when I am gone. But we cannot wait. We must go on our journey in another hour. It will be to you only parting a little sooner, for her good too. You cannot be selfish where your dear child is concerned. No, no, God knows I would suffer anything for her. I love her better than my own soul. But I cannot give her up till I must. Have pity, have pity. She is all I have left. Parents, sister, husband, home, all. Everything gone but her. My precious, precious baby. Oh, don't ask me to let her go from my arms while I live," she pleaded in heartbroken accents, with bitter sobs and tears. "We would not if it could not be helped," sobbed Mrs. Kemper. "But it cannot, and for her sake you will give us to her now?" Mr. Kemper joined his arguments and entreaties to those of his wife, They engaged to do all in their power for the well-being and happiness of the little one, treating her in every respect as if she were their own offspring, on the one condition that she should be given up entirely to them, never to be claimed by anyone, even a near relative or the mother herself, should she by any possibility survive. Mr. Kemper had torn a leaf from his notebook, and with pen and ink furnished by Irene, had drawn up a deed of gift to that effect, which he was urging the mother to sign. "No, no, I can never, never agree to that," she cried out in reference to the last stipulation. "Live without my own precious child? Never, never!" "A mere form," he said. "You cannot live many days, my good woman. Do you not feel that it is so?" She but clasped her child closer, while her whole frame shook with the violence of her emotion. She seemed almost ready to expire with the mental anguish superadded to her great physical prostration. At length the distant rumble of an approaching train was heard. "There, you have but a moment left for decision," said the gentleman. "That is the train we must take. Will you sacrifice your child's welfare, or your own feelings?" She was now seated beside the table, her child asleep in her arms. He laid the deed of gift he had made out before her as he spoke, and put a pen between her fingers. She lifted her eyes to his with a look of wild anguish fit to move a heart of stone. He simply pointed to the unconscious babe. She looked at it, seized the pen, hurriedly scrawled a name at the foot of the deed, and fell back fainting. But the shrill whistle of the locomotive and the thunder of the train close at hand aroused her. "We must go now. Let me take her," Mrs. Kemper was saying in tones tremulous with great compassion. "I will love her dearly, dearly. I will cherish her as the apple of my eye. Let me wrap this warm shawl around her." "No, Dolly, I'll carry her," Mr. Kemper said in a tone of half-suppressed delight as he finished buttoning up his overcoat after safely depositing the notebook with the deed of gift in an inner pocket. But silently the mother put them both aside. There was agony in her one emaciated face. She could not speak for the choking in her throat, but she strained the child to her heart, lay her cold white cheek to its warm and rosy face, and kissed it passionately again and again. "We must go," repeated Mrs. Kemper. "Oh, my heart aches for you, but we must go." "We must indeed, poor thing. There is not a moment to be lost," added Mr. Kemper, taking the child from her with gentle force. "Here, this will supply your needs while you live, I think," putting a roll of notes into her hand. She dropped them as if a serpent had stung her, and with a wild cry rushed after him, as hastily wrapping a shawl about the infant he ran with it towards the train, his wife close behind him. They had already tarried almost too long, had scarcely time to gain the platform of the nearest car ere the train swept swiftly on its way. "My child! My child! Give me back my child!" shrieked the distracted mother, pursuing with outstretched arms, the storm beating pitilessly on her uncovered head, her long dark hair streaming in the wind. For a moment she seemed to fly over the ground, love and despair lending her unnatural strength and speed. The next, as the train was lost to sight in the depth of the forest, she tottered and would have fallen, but for the strong arm of a kindly switchman, who hastily setting down his lantern sprung forward just in time to save her. "She's in a dead faint, poor thing," he muttered to himself. "Here, Bill," to a comrade, "take a hold and help me to carry her into the depot." "Who is she, Jack? And what ails her?" asked Bill, hurrying up and holding his lantern high, while he peered curiously into the white, unconscious face. "No time to talk till we get her in out of the wet," returned Jack gruffly. They laid her down on the settee. "She's a human critter and in sore trouble, that's all I know," remarked Jack quietly, drawing his coat sleeve across his eyes as the two stood gazing upon the pitiful sight. End of Saying the Contract and What It Cost. Chapter 1. A Wanderer by Martha Finlay.
This Side of Paradise. Book 1. The Romantic Egotist. Chapter 1. Amory, Son of Beatrice. By F. Scott Fitzgerald. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Read by Faith Pack. Amory Blaine inherited from his mother every trait, except the stray, inexpressible few that made him worthwhile. His father, an ineffectual, inarticulate man, with a taste for Byron and a habit of drowsing over the Encyclopaedia Britannica, grew wealthy at 30 through the death of 2 elder brothers, successful Chicago brokers, and in the first flush of feeling that the world was his, went to Bar Harbor and met Beatrice O'Hara. In consequence, Stephen Blaine handed down to posterity his height of just under 6 feet and his tendency to waver at crucial moments, these 2 abstractions appearing in his son Amory. For many years he hovered in the background of his family's life, an unassertive figure with a face half obliterated by lifeless, silky hair, continually occupied in taking care of his wife, continually harassed by the idea that he didn't and couldn't understand her. But Beatrice Blaine, there was a woman. Early pictures taken on her father's estate at Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, or in Rome at the Sacred Heart Convent, an educational extravagance that in her youth was only for the daughters of the exceptionally wealthy, showed the exquisite delicacy of her features, the consummate art and simplicity of her clothes. A brilliant education she had. Her youth passed in Renaissance glory. She was versed in the latest gossip of the older Roman families. Known by name as a fabulously wealthy American girl to Cardinal Vittore and Queen Margherita, and more subtle celebrities that one must have had some culture even to have heard of. She learned in England to prefer whiskey and soda to wine, and her small talk was broadened in 2 senses during a winter in Vienna. All in all, Beatrice O'Hara absorbed the sort of education that will be quite impossible ever again, a tutelage measured by the number of things and people one could be contemptuous of and charming about, a culture rich in all arts and traditions, barren of all ideas, in the last of those days when the great gardener clipped the inferior roses to produce one perfect bud. In her less important moments she returned to America, met Stephen Blaine, and married him. This almost entirely because she was a little bit weary, a little bit sad. Her only child was carried through a tiresome season, and brought into the world on a spring day in '96. When Amory was 5 he was already a delightful companion for her. He was an auburn-haired boy, with great handsome eyes, which he would grow up to in time, a facile imaginative mind, and a taste for fancy dress. From his 4th to his 10th year he "did" the country with his mother in her father's private car, from Coronado, where his mother became so bored that she had a nervous breakdown in a fashionable hotel, down to Mexico City, where she took a mild, almost epidemic consumption. This trouble pleased her, and later she made use of it as an intrinsic part of her atmosphere, especially after several astounding bracers. So, while more or less fortunate little rich boys were defying governesses on the beach at Newport, or being spanked or tutored or read to from Do and Dare or Frank on the Mississippi, Amory was biting acquiescent bellboys in the Waldorf, outgrowing a natural repugnance to chamber music and symphonies, and deriving a highly specialized education from his mother. Amory. Yes, Beatrice? Such a quaint name for his mother. She encouraged it. Dear, don't think of getting out of bed yet. I've always suspected that early rising in early life makes one nervous. Clotilde is having your breakfast brought up. All right. I'm feeling very old today, Amory, she would sigh, her face a rare cameo of pathos, her voice exquisitely modulated, her hands as facile as Bernhardt's. My nerves are on edge, on edge! We must leave this terrifying place tomorrow, and go searching for sunshine. Amory's penetrating green eyes would look out through tangled hair at his mother. Even at this age he had no illusions about her. Amory. Oh, yes? I want you to take a red-hot bath, as hot as you can bear it, and just relax your nerves. You can read in the tub if you wish. She fed him sections of the Fête Galante before he was 10. At 11 he could talk glibly, if rather reminiscently, of Brahms and Mozart and Beethoven. One afternoon, when left alone in the hotel at Hot Springs, he sampled his mother's apricot cordial, and as the taste pleased him, he became quite tipsy. This was fun for a while, but he essayed a cigarette in his exaltation, and succumbed to a vulgar plebeian reaction. though this incident horrified Beatrice. It also secretly amused her, and became part of what in a later generation would have been termed her line. "This son of mine," he heard her tell a room full of awe-struck, admiring women one day, "is entirely sophisticated and quite charming, but delicate. We're all delicate here, you know." Her hand was radiantly outlined against her beautiful bosom. Then sinking her voice to a whisper, she told them of the apricot cordial. They rejoiced, for she was a brave raconteuse, but many were the keys turned in sideboard locks that night against the possible defection of little Bobby or Barbara. These domestic pilgrimages were invariably in state. 2 maids, the private car, or Mr. Blaine when available, and very often a physician. When Amory had the whooping cough, 4 disgusted specialists glared at each other, hunched around his bed. When he took scarlet fever, the number of attendants, including physicians and nurses, totaled 14. However, blood being thicker than broth, he was pulled through. The Blaines were attached to no city. They were the Blaines of Lake Geneva. They had quite enough relatives to serve in place of friends, and an enviable standing from Pasadena to Cape Cod. But Beatrice grew more and more prone to like only new acquaintances, as there were certain stories, such as the history of her Constitution and its many amendments, memories of her years abroad, that it was necessary for her to repeat at regular intervals. Like Freudian dreams, they must be thrown off, else they would sweep in and lay siege to her nerves. But Beatrice was critical about American women, especially the floating population of ex-Westerners. "They have accents, my dear," she told Amory. "Not Southern accents or Boston accents, not an accent attached to any locality, just an accent." She became dreamy. "They pick up old, moth-eaten London accents that are down on their luck and have to be used by someone. They talk as an English butler might after several years in a Chicago Grand Opera Company." She became almost incoherent. "Suppose, time in every Western woman's life, she feels her husband is prosperous enough for her to have accent. They try to impress me, my dear." Though she thought of her body as a mass of frailties, she considered her soul quite as ill, and therefore important in her life. She had once been a Catholic, but discovering that priests were infinitely more attentive when she was in process of losing or regaining faith in Mother Church, she maintained an enchantingly wavering attitude. Often she deplored the bourgeois quality of the American Catholic clergy, and was quite sure that had she lived in the shadow of the great continental cathedrals, her soul would still be a thin flame on the mighty altar of Rome. Still, next to doctors, priests were her favourite sport. "Ah, Bishop Whiston," she would declare, "I do not want to talk of myself. I can imagine the stream of hysterical women fluttering at your doors, beseeching you to be simpatico." Then, after an interlude filled by the clergyman, "But my mood is oddly dissimilar." Only to bishops and above did she divulge her clerical romance. When she had first returned to her country there had been a pagan Swinburnian young man in Asheville, for whose passionate kisses and unsentimental conversations she had taken a decided penchant. They had discussed the matter pro and con with an intellectual romancing quite devoid of soppiness. Eventually she had decided to marry for background, and the young pagan from Asheville had gone through a spiritual crisis, joined the Catholic Church, and was now Monseigneur Darcy. "Indeed, Mrs. Blaine, he is still delightful company, quite the Cardinal's right-hand man." "Amory will go to him one day, I know," breathed the beautiful lady, "and Monseigneur Darcy will understand him as he understood me." Amory became 13, rather tall and slender, and more than ever on to his Celtic mother. He had tutored occasionally, the idea being that he was to keep up, at each place taking up the work where he left off. Yet as no tutor ever found the place he left off, his mind was still in very good shape. What a few more years of this life would have made of him is problematical. However, 4 hours out from land, Italy bound, with Beatrice, his appendix burst, probably from too many meals in bed, and after a series of frantic telegrams to Europe and America, to the amazement of the passengers the great ship slowly wheeled around and returned to New York to deposit Amory at the pier. You will admit that if it was not life, it was magnificent. After the operation Beatrice had a nervous breakdown that bore a suspicious resemblance to delirium tremens, and Amory was left in Minneapolis, destined to spend the ensuing 2 years with his aunt and uncle. There the crude, vulgar air of Western civilization first catches him, in his underwear, so to speak. A kiss for Amory. His lip curled when he read it. "I'm going to have a bobbing party," it said, "on Thursday, December the 17th, at 5 o'clock, and I would like it very much if you could come. RSVP. Yours truly, Myra St. Clair." He had been 2 months in Minneapolis, and his chief struggle had been the concealing from the other guys at school how particularly superior he felt himself to be, yet this conviction was built upon shifting sands. He had shown off one day in French class (he was in senior French class), to the utter confusion of Mr. Reardon, whose accent Amory damned contemptuously, and to the delight of the class. Mr. Reardon, who had spent several weeks in Paris 10 years before, took his revenge on the verbs, whenever he had his book open. But another time Amory showed off in history class, with quite disastrous results, for the boys there were his own age, and they shrilled innuendos at each other all the following week. "Oh, I believe, don't you know, the American Revolution was largely an affair of the middle classes." Or, "Washington came of very good blood. Oh, quite good, I believe." Amory ingeniously tried to retrieve himself by blundering on purpose. 2 years before he had commenced a history of the United States, which, though it only got as far as the colonial wars, had been pronounced by his mother completely enchanting. His chief disadvantage lay in athletics, but as soon as he discovered that it was the touchstone of power and popularity at school, he began to make furious, persistent efforts to excel in the winter sports, and with his ankles aching and bending in spite of his efforts, he skated valiantly around the Loreley rink every afternoon, wondering how soon he would be able to carry a hockey stick without getting it inexplicably tangled in his skates. The invitation to Miss Myra St. Clair's bobbing party spent the morning in his coat pocket, where it had an intense physical affair with a dusty piece of peanut brittle. During the afternoon he brought it to light with a sigh, and after some consideration and a preliminary draft in the back of Collar & Daniel's first-year Latin, composed an answer. "My dear Miss St. Clair, your truly charming invitation for the evening of next Thursday evening was truly delightful to receive this morning. I will be charmed and enchanted indeed to present my compliments on next Thursday evening. Faithfully, Amory Blaine." On Thursday, therefore, he walked pensively along the slippery, shovel-scraped sidewalks, and came in sight of Myra's house, on the half hour after 5, a lateness which he fancied his mother would have favoured. He waited on the doorstep with his eyes nonchalantly half closed, and planned his entrance with precision. He would cross the floor, not too hastily, to Mrs. St. Clair, and say with exactly the correct modulation, "My dear Mrs. St. Clair, I'm frightfully sorry to be late, but my maid—" He paused there and realized he would be quoting, "But my uncle and I had to see a fella. Yes, I've met your enchanting daughter at dancing school." Then he would shake hands, using that slight, half-foreign bow, with all the starchy little females, and nod to the fellows who would be standing round, paralyzed into rigid groups for mutual protection. A butler, one of the 3 in Minneapolis, swung open the door. Amory stepped inside and divested himself of cap and coat. He was mildly surprised not to hear the shrill squawk of conversation from the next room, and he decided it must be quite formal. He approved of that, as he approved of the butler. "Miss Myra," he said. Too surprised, the butler grinned horribly. "Oh, yeah," he declared, "she's here." He was unaware that his failure to be Cockney was ruining his standing. Amory considered him coldly. "But," continued the butler, his voice rising unnecessarily, "she's the one what is here. The party's gone." Amory gasped in sudden horror. "What?" "She's been waitin' for Amory Blaine. That's you, ain't it? Her mother says that if he showed up by 5:30, you two was to go after him in the Packard." Amory's despair was crystallized by the appearance of Myra herself, bundled to the ears in a polo coat, her face plainly sulky, her voice pleasant only with difficulty. "'Lo, Amory." "'Lo, Myra." He had described the state of his vitality. "Well, you got here anyways." "Well, I'll tell you. I guess you don't know about the auto accident," he romanced. Myra's eyes opened wide. Who was it to? Well, he continued desperately, Uncle and Aunt and I. Was anyone killed? Amory paused and then nodded. Your uncle? Alarm. Oh no, just a horse. A sort of grey horse. At this point the Earth's butler snickered. Probably killed the engine, he suggested. Amory would have put him on the rack without a scruple. We'll go now, said Myra coolly. You see, Amory, the bobs were ordered for 5 and everybody was here, so we couldn't wait. Well, I couldn't help it, could I? So Mama said for me to wait till 5:30. We'll catch the bob before it gets to the Minnehaha Club, Amory. Amory's shredded poise dropped from him. He pictured the happy party jingling along snowy streets, the appearance of the limousine, the horrible public descent of him and Myra before 60 reproachful eyes, his apology, a real one this time. He sighed aloud. What? Inquired Myra. Nothing. I was just yawning. Are we going to surely catch up with them before they get there? He was encouraging a faint hope that they might slip into the Minnehaha Club and meet the others there, be found in blasé seclusion before the fire, and quite regain his lost attitude. Oh, sure, Mike. We'll catch 'em all right. Let's hurry. He became conscious of his stomach. As they stepped into the machine, he hurriedly slapped the paint of diplomacy over a rather box-like plan he had conceived. It was based upon some trade lasts gleaned at dancing school, to the effect that he was awful good-looking in English, sort of. Myra, he said, lowering his voice and choosing his words carefully, I beg 1,000 pardons. Can you ever forgive me? She regarded him gravely, his intent green eyes, his mouth, that to her 13-year-old arrow-collar taste was the quintessence of romance. Yes, Myra could forgive him very easily. Why, yes, sure. He looked at her again and then dropped his eyes. He had lashes. I'm awful, he said sadly. I'm different. I don't know why I make faux pas. 'Cause I don't care, I suppose. Then recklessly, I've been smoking too much. I got tobacco heart. Myra pictured an all-night tobacco debauch, with Amory pale and reeling from the effect of nicotine lungs. She gave a little gasp. Oh, Amory, don't smoke. You'll stunt your growth. I don't care, he persisted gloomily. I got the habit. I've done a lot of things that if my family knew. He hesitated, giving her imagination time to picture dark horrors. I went to the burlesque show last week. Myra was quite overcome. He turned the green eyes on her again. You're the only girl in town I like much, he exclaimed in a rush of sentiment. You're simpatico. Myra was not sure that she was, but it sounded stylish though vaguely improper. Thick dusk had descended outside, and as the limousine made a sudden turn she was jolted against him. Their hands touched. You shouldn't smoke, Amory, she whispered. Don't you know that? He shook his head. Nobody cares. Myra hesitated. I care. Something stirred within Amory. Oh, yes, you do. You got a crush on Froggy Parker. I guess everybody knows that. No, I haven't, very slowly. A silence, while Amory thrilled. There was something fascinating about Myra, shut away here cozily from the dim, chill air. Myra, a little bundle of clothes, with strands of yellow hair curling out from under her skating cap. Because I've got a crush, too. He paused, for he heard in the distance the sound of young laughter, and peering through the frosted glass along the lamp-lit street, he made out the dark outline of the bobbing party. He must act quickly. He reached over with a violent, jerky effort and clutched Myra's hand, her thumb to be exact. Tell him to go to the Minnehaha straight, he whispered. I want to talk to you. I gotta talk to you. Myra made out the party ahead, had an instant vision of her mother, and then, alas for convention, glanced into the eyes beside. Turn down this side street, Richard, and drive straight to the Minnehaha Club, she cried through the speaking tube. Amory sank back against the cushions with a sigh of relief. I can kiss her, he thought. I'll bet I can. I'll bet I can. Overhead the sky was half crystalline, half misty, and the night around was chill and vibrant with rich tension. From the country club steps the road stretched away, dark creases in the white blanket, huge heaps of snow lining the sides like the tracks of giant moles. They lingered for a moment on the steps, and watched the white holiday moon. Pale moons like that one. Amory made a vague gesture. Make people mysterious. You look like a young witch with her cap off, and her hair sort of mussed. Her hands clutched at her hair. Oh, leave it. It looks good. They drifted up the stairs, and Myra led the way into the little den of his dreams, where a cozy fire was burning before a big sink-down couch. A few years later this was to be a great stage for Amory, a cradle for many an emotional crisis. Now they talked for a moment about bobbing parties. "There's always a bunch of shy fellas," he commented, "sitting at the tail of the bob, sort o' lurkin' and whisperin' and pushin' each other off. Then there's always some crazy cross-eyed girl," he gave a terrifying imitation. "She's always talkin' hard, sorta, to the chaperone." "You're such a funny boy," puzzled Myra. "How do you mean?" Amory gave immediate attention, on his own ground at last. "Oh, always talking about crazy things. Why don't you come skiing with Marilyn and I tomorrow?" "I don't like girls in the daytime," he said shortly, and then, thinking this a bit abrupt, he added, "But I like you." He cleared his throat. "I like you first and second and third." Myra's eyes became dreamy. What a story this would make to tell Marilyn! Here on the couch with this wonderful-looking boy. The little fire. The sense that they were all alone in the great building. Myra capitulated. The atmosphere was too appropriate. "I like you the first 25, she confessed, her voice trembling, "and Froggy Parker 26th. Froggy had fallen 25 places in 1 hour. As yet he had not even noticed it. But Amory, being on the spot, leaned over quickly and kissed Myra's cheek. He had never kissed a girl before, and he tasted his lips curiously, as if he had munched some new fruit. Then their lips brushed like young wildflowers in the wind. "We're awful!" rejoiced Myra gently. She slipped her hand into his, her head drooped against his shoulder. Sudden revulsion seized Amory, disgust, loathing for the whole incident. He desired frantically to be away, never to see Myra again, never to kiss anyone. He became conscious of his face and hers, of their clinging hands, and he wanted to creep out of his body and hide somewhere safe out of sight, up in the corner of his mind. "Kiss me again." Her voice came out of a great void. "I don't want to," he heard himself saying. There was another pause. "I don't want to," he repeated passionately. Myra sprang up, her cheeks pink with bruised vanity, the great bow on the back of her head trembling sympathetically. "I hate you!" she cried. "Don't you ever dare to speak to me again." "What?" stammered Amory. "I'll tell Mamma you kissed me. I will too. I will too. I'll tell Mamma and she won't let me play with you." Amory arose and stared at her helplessly, as though she were a new animal of whose presence on the earth he had not heretofore been aware. The door opened suddenly, and Myra's mother appeared on the threshold, fumbling with her lorgnette. "Well," she began, adjusting it benignantly, "the man at the desk told me you two children were up here. How do you do, Amory?" Amory watched Myra and waited for the crash, but none came. The pout faded, the high pink subsided, and Myra's voice was placid as a summer lake when she answered her mother. "Oh, we started so late, Mamma, that I thought we might as well." He heard from below the shrieks of laughter and smelled the vapid odor of hot chocolate and tea cakes as he silently followed mother and daughter downstairs. The sound of the gramophone mingled with the voices of many girls humming the air, and a faint glow was born and spread over him. Casey Jones mounted to the cabin, Casey Jones, with his orders in his hands. Casey Jones mounted to the cabin, took his farewell journey to the promised land. Snapshots of the Young Egotist. Amory spent nearly 2 years in Minneapolis. The first winter he wore moccasins that were born yellow, but after many applications of oil and dirt assumed their mature color, a dirty greenish-brown. He wore a gray plaid mackinaw coat, and a red toboggan cap. His dog, Count Delmonte, ate the red cap, so his uncle gave him a gray one that pulled down over his face. The trouble with this one was that you breathed into it and your breath froze. One day the darn thing froze his cheek. He rubbed snow on his cheek, but it turned bluish-black just the same. The Count Delmonte ate a box of bluing once, but it didn't hurt him. Later, however, he lost his mind and ran madly up the street, bumping into fences, rolling in gutters, and pursuing his eccentric course out of Amory's life. Amory cried on his bed. "Poor little Count," he cried. "Oh, poor little Count." After several months he suspected Count of a fine piece of emotional acting. Amory and Frog Parker considered that the greatest line in literature occurred in Act 3 of Arsène Lupin. They sat in the first row at the Wednesday and Saturday matinees. The line was, "If one can't be a great artist or a great soldier, the best thing is to be a great criminal." Amory fell in love again, and wrote a poem. This was it: "Marilyn and Sally, those are the girls for me. Marilyn stands above Sally in that sweet deep love." He was interested in whether McGovern of Minnesota would make the first or second All-American, how to do the card pass, how to do the coin toss, chameleon ties, how babies were born, and whether Three-Fingered Brown was really a better pitcher than Christy Mathewson. Among other things he read, For the Honor of the School, Little Women, twice, The Common Law, Sappho, Dangerous Dan McGrew, The Broad Highway, 3 times, The Fall of the House of Usher, 3 weeks, Mary Ware the Little Colonel's Chum, Gunga Din, The Police Gazette, and Jim Jam Gems. He had all the Henty biases in history, and was particularly fond of the cheerful murder stories of Mary Roberts Rinehart. School ruined his French, and gave him a distaste for standard authors. His masters considered him idle, unreliable, and superficially clever. He collected locks of hair from many girls. He wore the rings of several. Finally he could borrow no more rings, owing to his nervous habit of chewing them out of shape. This, it seemed, usually aroused the jealous suspicions of the next borrower. All through the summer months Amory and Frog Parker went each week to the stock company. Afterward they would stroll home in the balmy air of August night, dreaming along Hennepin and Nicollet Avenues, through the gay crowd. Amory wondered how people could fail to notice that he was a boy marked for glory, and when faces of the throng turned toward him and ambiguous eyes stared into his, he assumed the most romantic of expressions and walked on the air cushions that lie on the asphalts of 14. Always, after he was in bed, there were voices, indefinite, fading, enchanting, just outside his window, and before he fell asleep he would dream one of his favorite waking dreams, the one about becoming a great halfback, or the one about the Japanese invasion, when he was rewarded by being made the youngest general in the world. It was always the becoming he dreamed of, never the being. This, too, was quite characteristic of Amory. Code of the Young Egotist. Before he was summoned back to Lake Geneva, he had appeared, shy but inwardly glowing, in his first long trousers, set off by a purple accordion tie and a Belmont collar with the edges unassailably meeting, purple socks, and handkerchief with a purple border peeping from the breast pocket. But more than that, he had formulated his first philosophy, a code to live by, which, as near as it can be named, was a sort of aristocratic egotism. He had realized that his best interests were bound up with those of a certain variant, changing person, whose label, in order that his past might always be identified with him, was Amory Blaine. Amory marked himself a fortunate youth, capable of infinite expansion for good or evil. He did not consider himself a strong character, but relied on his facility, learned things sorta quick, and his superior mentality, read a lot of deep books. He was proud of the fact that he could never become a mechanical or scientific genius. From no other heights was he debarred. Physically, Amory thought he was exceedingly handsome. He was. He fancied himself an athlete of possibilities and a supple dancer. Socially, here his condition was, perhaps, most dangerous. He granted himself personality, charm, magnetism, poise, the power of dominating all contemporary males, the gift of fascinating all women. Mentally, complete, unquestioned superiority. Now a confession will have to be made. Amory had rather a Puritan conscience. Not that he yielded to it. Later in life he almost completely slew it, but at 15 it made him consider himself a great deal worse than other boys. Unscrupulousness, the desire to influence people in almost every way, even for evil, a certain coldness and lack of affection, amounting sometimes to cruelty, a shifting sense of honor, an unholy selfishness, a puzzled furtive interest in everything concerning sex. There was, also, a curious strain of weakness running crosswise through his make-up. A harsh phrase from the lips of an older boy (older boys usually detested him) was liable to sweep him off his poise into surly sensitiveness, or timid stupidity. He was a slave to his own moods, and he felt that though he was capable of recklessness and audacity, he possessed neither courage, perseverance, nor self-respect. Vanity, tempered with self-suspicion if not self-knowledge, a sense of people as automatons to his will, a desire to pass as many boys as possible and get to a vague top of the world, with this background did Amory drift into adolescence. Preparatory to the Great Adventure. The train slowed up with midsummer languor at Lake Geneva, and Amory caught sight of his mother waiting in her electric on the gravelled station drive. It was an ancient electric, one of the early types, and painted gray. The sight of her sitting there, slenderly erect, and of her face, where beauty and dignity combined, melting to a dreamy recollected smile, filled him with a sudden great pride of her. As they kissed coolly and he stepped into the electric, he felt a quick fear lest he had lost the requisite charm to measure up to her. "Dear boy, you're so tall. Look behind and see if there's anything coming." She looked left and right. She slipped cautiously into a speed of 2 miles an hour, beseeching Amory to act as sentinel, and at one busy crossing she made him get out and run ahead to signal forward like a traffic policeman. Beatrice was what might be termed a careful driver. "You are tall, but you're still very handsome. You've skipped the awkward age, or is that 16? Perhaps it's 14 or 15. I could never remember, but you've skipped it." "Don't embarrass me," murmured Amory. "But, my dear boy, what odd clothes. They look as if they were a set, don't they? Is your underwear purple too?" Amory grunted impolitely. "You must go to Brooks and get some really nice suits. Oh, we'll have a talk tonight, or perhaps tomorrow night. I want to tell you about your heart. You've probably been neglecting your heart, and you don't know." Amory thought how superficial was the recent overlay of his own generation. Aside from a minute shyness, he felt that the old cynical kinship with his mother had not been one bit broken. Yet for the first few days he wandered about the gardens and along the shore in a state of super-loneliness, finding a lethargic content in smoking bowl at the garage with one of the chauffeurs. The 60 acres of the estate were dotted with old and new summer houses and many fountains and white benches that came suddenly into sight from foliage-hung hiding-places. There was a great and constantly increasing family of white cats that prowled the many flower-beds and were silhouetted suddenly at night against the darkening trees. It was on one of the shadowy paths that Beatrice at last captured Amory, after Mr. Blaine had, as usual, retired for the evening to his private library. After reproving him for avoiding her, she took him for a long tete-a-tete in the moonlight. He could not reconcile himself to her beauty, that was mother to his own, the exquisite neck and shoulders, the grace of a fortunate woman of 30. "Amory, dear," she crooned softly, "I had such a strange, weird time after I left you." "Did you, Beatrice?" "When I had my last breakdown." She spoke of it as a sturdy, gallant feat. "The doctors told me," her voice sang on a confidential note, "that if any man alive had done the consistent drinking that I have, he would have been physically shattered, my dear, and in his grave, long in his grave." Amory winced and wondered how this would have sounded to Froggy Parker. "Yes," continued Beatrice tragically, "I had dreams, wonderful visions." She pressed the palms of her hands into her eyes. "I saw bronze rivers lapping marble shores, and great birds that soared through the air, parti-colored birds with iridescent plumage. I heard strange music and the flare of barbaric trumpets." "What?" Amory had snickered. "What, Amory?" "I said go on, Beatrice." "That was all. It merely recurred and recurred. Gardens that flaunted colouring against which this would be quite dull. Moons that whirled and swayed, paler than winter moons, more golden than harvest moons. Are you quite well now, Beatrice? Quite well. As well as I will ever be. I'm not understood, Amory. I know that can't express it to you, Amory, but I'm not understood. Amory was quite moved. He put his arm around his mother, rubbing his head gently against her shoulder. Poor Beatrice. Poor Beatrice. Tell me about you, Amory. Did you have 2 horrible years? Amory considered lying and then decided against it. No, Beatrice, I enjoyed them. I adapted myself to the bourgeoisie. I became conventional. He surprised himself by saying that, and he pictured how Froggy would have gaped. Beatrice, he said suddenly, I want to go away to school. Everybody in Minneapolis is going to go away to school. Beatrice showed some alarm. But you're only 15. Yes, but everybody goes away to school at 15, and I want to, Beatrice. On Beatrice's suggestion, the subject was dropped for the rest of the walk, but a week later she delighted him by saying, Amory, I've decided to let you have your way. If you still want to, you can go to school. Yes? To St. Regis's in Connecticut. Amory felt a quick excitement. It's being arranged, continued Beatrice. It's better that you should go away. I'd have preferred you to have gone to Eton, and then to Christ Church, Oxford, but it seems impracticable now, and for the present we'll let the university question take care of itself. What are you going to do, Beatrice? Heaven knows. It seems my fate to fret away my years in this country. Not for a second do I regret being American. Indeed, I think that a regret typical of very vulgar people. And I feel sure we are the great coming nation. Yet, and she sighed, I feel my life should have drowsed away close to an older, mellower civilization, a land of greens and autumnal browns. Amory did not answer, so his mother continued. My regret is that you haven't been abroad. But still, as you are a man, it's better that you should grow up here under the snarling eagle. Is that the right term? Amory agreed that it was. She would not have appreciated the Japanese invasion. When do I go to school? Next month. You'll have to start east a little early to take your examinations. After that you'll have a free week, so I want you to go up the Hudson to pay a visit. To who? To Monseigneur Darcy, Amory. He wants to see you. He went to Harrow and then to Yale, became a Catholic. I want him to talk to you. I feel he can be such a help. She stroked his auburn hair gently. Dear Amory, dear Amory, dear Beatrice. So early in September, Amory, provided with 6 suits summer underwear, 6 suits winter underwear, 1 sweater or t-shirt, 1 jersey, 1 overcoat, winter, etc., set out for New England, the land of schools. There were Andover and Exeter with their memories of New England dead, large college-like democracies. St. Mark's, Groton, St. Regis, recruited from Boston and the Knickerbocker families of New York. St. Paul's with its great rinks. Pomfret and St. George's, prosperous and well-dressed. Taft and Hotchkiss, which prepared the wealth of the Middle West for social success at Yale. Pauling, Westminster, Coate, Kent, and 100 others, all milling out their well-set-up, conventional, impressive type. Year after year, their mental stimulus the college entrance exams, their vague purpose set forth in 100 circulars as to impart a thorough mental, moral, and physical training as a Christian gentleman, to fit the boy for meeting the problems of his day and generation, and to give a solid foundation in the arts and sciences. At St. Regis, Amory stayed 3 days and took his exams with a scoffing confidence, then doubling back to New York to pay his tutelary visit. The metropolis, barely glimpsed, made little impression on him, except for the sense of cleanliness he drew from the tall white buildings seen from a Hudson River steamboat in the early morning. Indeed, his mind was so crowded with dreams of athletic prowess at school that he considered this visit only as a rather tiresome prelude to the great adventure. This, however, it did not prove to be. Monseigneur Darcy's house was an ancient, rambling structure set on a hill overlooking the river, and there lived its owner, between his trips to all parts of the Roman Catholic world, rather like an exiled Stuart king, waiting to be called to the rule of his land. Monseigneur was 54 then, and bustling, a trifle too stout for symmetry, with hair the color of spun gold, and a brilliant, enveloping personality. When he came into the room, clad in his full purple regalia from thatch to toe, he resembled a Turner's sunset, and attracted both admiration and attention. He had written 2 novels, one of them violently anti-Catholic, just before his conversion, and 5 years later another, in which he had attempted to turn all his clever jibes against Catholics into even cleverer innuendos against Episcopalians. He was intensely ritualistic, startlingly dramatic, loved the idea of God enough to be a celibate, and rather liked his neighbour. Children adored him because he was like a child, youth revelled in his company because he was still a youth, and couldn't be shocked. In the proper land and century he might have been a Richelieu. At present he was a very moral, very religious, if not particularly pious clergyman, making a great mystery about pulling rusty wires, and appreciating life to the fullest, if not entirely enjoying it. He and Amory took to each other at first sight, the jovial, impressive prelate who could dazzle an embassy ball, and the green-eyed, intent youth, in his first long trousers, accepted in their own minds a relation of father and son within a half-hour's conversation. "My dear boy, I've been waiting to see you for years. Take a big chair and we'll have a chat." "I've just come from school. St. Regis, you know." "So your mother says. A remarkable woman. Have a cigarette. I'm sure you smoke. Well, if you're like me, you loathe all science and mathematics." Amory nodded vehemently. "Hate 'em all. Like English and history." "Of course. You'll hate school for a while, too. But I'm glad you're going to St. Regis." "Why?" "Because there's a gentleman's school, and democracy won't hit you so early. You'll find plenty of that in college." "I want to go to Princeton," said Amory. "I don't know why, but I think of all Harvard men as sissies, like I used to be, and all Yale men as wearing big blue sweaters and smoking pipes." Monseigneur chuckled. "I'm one, you know." "Oh, you're different. I think of Princeton as being lazy and good-looking and aristocratic. You know, like a spring day. Harvard seems sort of indoors. And Yale is November, crisp and energetic," finished Monseigneur. "That's it." They slipped briskly into an intimacy from which they never recovered. "I was for Bonnie Prince Charlie," announced Amory. "Of course you were. And for Hannibal?" "Yes, and for the Southern Confederacy." He was rather skeptical about being an Irish patriot. He suspected that being Irish was being somewhat common, but Monseigneur assured him that Ireland was a romantic lost cause and Irish people quite charming, and that it should, by all means, be one of his principal biases. After a crowded hour which included several more cigarettes, and during which Monseigneur learned, to his surprise but not to his horror, that Amory had not been brought up a Catholic, he announced that he had another guest. This turned out to be the Honorable Thornton Hancock, of Boston, ex-minister to The Hague, author of an erudite history of the Middle Ages and the last of a distinguished patriotic and brilliant family. "He comes here for a rest," said Monseigneur confidentially, treating Amory as a contemporary. "I act as an escape from the weariness of agnosticism, and I think I'm the only man who knows how a staid old mind is really at sea and longs for a sturdy spar like the Church to cling to." Their first luncheon was one of the memorable events of Amory's early life. He was quite radiant and gave off a peculiar brightness and charm. Monseigneur called out the best that he had thought by question and suggestion, and Amory talked with an ingenious brilliance of 1,000 impulses and desires and repulsions and faiths and fears. He and Monseigneur held the floor, and the older man, with his less receptive, less accepting, yet certainly not colder mentality, seemed content to listen and bask in the mellow sunshine that played between these two. Monseigneur gave the effect of sunlight to many people. Amory gave it in his youth, and to some extent when he was very much older, but never again was it quite so mutually spontaneous. "He's a radiant boy," thought Thornton Hancock, who had seen the splendor of 2 continents and talked with Parnell and Gladstone and Bismarck. And afterward he added to Monseigneur, "But his education ought not to be entrusted to a school or college." But for the next 4 years the best of Amory's intellect was concentrated on matters of popularity, the intricacies of a university social system and American society as represented by Biltmore teas and hot springs golf links. In all, a wonderful week that saw Amory's mind turned inside out, 100 of his theories confirmed, and his joy of life crystallized to 1,000 ambitions. Not that the conversation was scholastic, heaven forbid! Amory had only the vaguest idea as to what Bernard Shaw was, but Monseigneur made quite as much out of the beloved vagabond and Sir Nigel, taking good care that Amory never once felt out of his depth. But the trumpets were sounding for Amory's preliminary skirmish with his own generation. "You're not sorry to go, of course. With people like us, our home is where we are not," said Monseigneur. "I am sorry. No, you're not. No one person in the world is necessary to you or to me. Well, good-bye." The egotist down. Amory's 2 years at St. Regis, though in turn painful and triumphant, had as little real significance in his own life as the American prep school, crushed as it is under the heel of the universities, has to American life in general. We have no Eton to create the self-consciousness of a governing class. We have instead clean, flaccid, and innocuous preparatory schools. He went all wrong at the start, was generally considered both conceited and arrogant, and universally detested. He played football intensely, alternating a reckless brilliancy with a tendency to keep himself as safe from hazard as decency would permit. In a wild panic he backed out of a fight with a boy his own size, to a chorus of scorn, and a week later, in desperation, picked a battle with another boy very much bigger, from which he emerged badly beaten, but rather proud of himself. He was resentful against all those in authority over him, and this, combined with lazy indifference toward his work, exasperated every master in the school. He grew discouraged, and imagined himself a pariah, took to sulking in corners and reading after lights. With a dread of being alone, he attached a few friends. But since they were not among the elite of the school, he used them simply as mirrors of himself, audiences before he might do that posing absolutely essential to him. He was unbearably lonely, desperately unhappy. There were some few grains of comfort. Whenever Amory was submerged, his vanity was the last part to go below the surface, so he could still enjoy a comfortable glow when Wookie, the deaf old housekeeper, told him that he was the best-looking boy she had ever seen. It had pleased him to be the lightest and youngest man on the first football squad. It pleased him when Dr. Dougal told him at the end of a heated conference that he could, if he wished, get the best marks in school. But Dr. Dougal was wrong. It was temperamentally impossible for Amory to get the best marks in school. Miserable, confined to bounds, unpopular with both faculty and students, that was Amory's first term. But at Christmas he had returned to Minneapolis, tight-lipped and strangely jubilant. "Oh, I was sort of fresh at first," he told Frog Parker patronizingly, "but I got along fine, lightest man on the squad. You ought to go away to school, Froggy. It's great stuff." Incident of the well-meaning professor. On the last night of his first term, Mr. Margetson, the senior master, sent word to Study Hall that Amory was to come to his room at 9. Amory suspected that advice was forthcoming, but he determined to be courteous, because this Mr. Margetson had been kindly disposed toward him. His summoner received him gravely, and motioned him to a chair. He hemmed several times and looked consciously kind, as a man will when he knows he's on delicate ground. "Amory," he began, "I've sent for you on a personal matter." "Yes, sir." "I've noticed you this year, and I like you. I think you have in you the makings of a very good man." "Yes, sir," Amory managed to articulate. He hated having people talk as if he were an admitted failure. "But I've noticed," continued the older man blindly, "that you're not very popular with the boys." "No, sir." Amory licked his lips. "Ah, I thought you might not understand exactly what it was they objected to. I'm going to tell you, because I believe that when a boy knows his difficulties he's better able to cope with them, to conform to what others expect of him." He ahemed again, with delicate reticence, and continued, "They seem to think that you're rather too fresh." Amory could stand no more. He rose from his chair, scarcely controlling his voice when he spoke. I know. Oh, don't you suppose I know?" His voice froze. "I know what they think. Do you suppose you have to tell me?" He paused. I've got to go back now. Hope I'm not rude." He left the room hurriedly. In the cool air outside, as he walked to his house, he exulted in his refusal to be helped. "That damn old fool!" he cried wildly. "As if I didn't know!" He decided, however, that this was a good excuse not to go back to study hall that night, so comfortably couched up in his room, he munched Nabiscos and finished The White Company. Incident of the Wonderful Girl. There was a bright star in February. New York burst upon him in Washington's birthday with the brilliance of a long-anticipated event. His glimpse of it as a vivid whiteness against a deep blue sky left a picture of splendor that rivaled the dream cities in the Arabian Nights. But this time he saw it by electric light, and romance gleamed from the chariot race sign on Broadway and from the woman's eyes at the Astor, where he and young Paskert from St. Regis had dinner. When they walked down the aisle of the theatre, greeted by the nervous twanging and discord of untuned violins and the sensuous, heavy fragrance of paint and powder, he moved in a sphere of Epicurean delight. Everything enchanted him. The play was The Little Millionaire, with George M. Cohan, and there was one stunning young brunette who made him sit with brimming eyes in the ecstasy of watching her dance. "Oh, you wonderful girl, what a wonderful girl you are," sang the tenor, and Amory agreed silently but passionately. "All your wonderful words thrill me through." The violins swelled and quavered on the last notes. The girl sank to a crumpled butterfly on the stage. A great burst of clapping filled the house. Oh, to fall in love like that, to the languorous magic melody of such a tune! The last scene was laid on a roof garden, and the cellos sighed to the musical moon, while light adventure and facile froth-like comedy flitted back and forth in the calcium. Amory was on fire to be an habitué of roof gardens, to meet a girl who should look like that. Better, that very girl, whose hair would be drenched with golden moonlight, while at his elbows sparkling wine was poured by an unintelligible waiter. When the curtain fell for the last time he gave such a long sigh that the people in front of him twisted around and stared, and said loud enough for him to hear, "What a remarkable-looking boy!" This took his mind off the play, and he wondered if he really did seem handsome to the population of New York. Paskert and he walked in silence toward their hotel. The former was the first to speak. His uncertain 15-year-old voice broke in a melancholy strain on Amory's musings. "I'd marry that girl tonight." There was no need to ask what girl he referred to. "I'd be proud to take her home and introduce her to my people," continued Paskert. Amory was distinctly impressed. He wished he had said it instead of Paskert. It sounded so mature. "I wonder about actresses. Are they all pretty bad?" "No, sir, not by a darn sight," said the worldly youth with emphasis, "and I know that girl's as good as gold. I can tell." They wandered on, mixing in the Broadway crowd, dreaming on the music that eddied out of the cafes. New faces flashed on and off like myriad lights, pale or rough faces, tired, yet sustained by a weary excitement. Amory watched them in fascination. He was planning his life. He was going to live in New York, and be known at every restaurant and cafe, wearing a dress suit from early evening to early morning, sleeping away the dull hours of the forenoon. "Yes, sir, I'd marry that girl tonight." Heroic and General Toad. October of his second and last year at St. Regis was a high point in Amory's memory. The game with Groton was played from 3 of a snappy, exhilarating afternoon far into the crisp autumnal twilight, and Amory at quarterback, exhorting in wild despair, making impossible tackles, calling signals in a voice that had diminished to a hoarse, furious whisper, yet found time to revel in the blood-stained bandage round his head, and the straining, glorious heroism of plunging, crashing bodies and aching limbs. For those minutes courage flowed like wine out of the November dusk, and he was the eternal hero, one with the sea rover on the prow of a Norse galley, one with Roland and Horatius, Sir Nigel and Ted Coy, scraped and stripped into trim and then flung by his own will into the breach, beating back the tide, hearing from afar the thunder of cheers. Finally bruised and weary, but still elusive, circling an end, twisting, changing pace, straight-arming, falling behind the Groton goal with 2 men on his legs, in the only touchdown of the game. The Philosophy of the Slicker. From the scoffing superiority of sixth form year and success, Amory looked back with cynical wonder on his status of the year before. He was changed as completely as Amory Blaine could ever be changed. Amory plus Beatrice plus 2 years in Minneapolis, these had been his ingredients when he entered St. Regis. But the Minneapolis years were not a thick enough overlay to conceal the Amory plus Beatrice from the ferreting eyes of a boarding school, so St. Regis had very painfully drilled Beatrice out of him, and begun to lay down new and more conventional planking on the fundamental Amory. But both St. Regis and Amory were unconscious of the fact that this fundamental Amory had not in himself changed. Those qualities for which he had suffered, his moodiness, his tendency to pose, his laziness, and his love of playing the fool, were now taken as a matter of course, recognized eccentricities in a star quarterback, a clever actor, and the editor of the St. Regis Tatler. It puzzled him to see impressionable small boys imitating the very vanities that had not long ago been contemptible weaknesses. After the football season he slumped into dreamy content. The night of the pre-holiday dance he slipped away and went early to bed for the pleasure of hearing the violin music cross the grass and come surging in at his window. Many nights he lay there dreaming awake of secret cafes in Montmartre, where ivory women delved in romantic mysteries with diplomats and soldiers of fortune, while orchestras played Hungarian waltzes, and the air was thick and exotic with intrigue and moonlight and adventure. In the spring he read L'Allegro by request, and was inspired to lyrical outpourings on the subject of Arcady and the pipes of Pan. He moved his bed so that the sun would wake him at dawn, that he might dress and go out to the archaic swing that hung from an apple tree near the sixth form house. Seating himself in this, he would pump higher and higher until he got the effect of swinging into the wide air, into a fairyland of piping satyrs and nymphs, with faces of fair-haired girls he passed in the streets of Eastchester. As the swing reached its highest point, Arcady really lay just over the brow of a certain hill, where the brown road dwindled out of sight in a golden dot. He read voluminously all spring, the beginning of his 18th year. The Gentleman from Indiana, The New Arabian Nights, The Morals of Marcus Ordain, The Man Who Was Thursday, which he liked without understanding, Stover at Yale, that became somewhat of a textbook, Dombey and Son, because he thought he really should read better stuff, Robert Chambers, David Graham Phillips, and E. Phillips Oppenheim complete, and a scattering of Tennyson and Kipling. Of all his classwork, only L'Allegro and some quality of rigid clarity and solid geometry stirred his languid interest. As June drew near, he felt the need of conversation to formulate his own ideas, and, to his surprise, found a co-philosopher in Rahel, the president of the sixth form. In many a talk, on the highroad or lying belly down along the edge of the baseball diamond, or late at night with their cigarettes glowing in the dark, they threshed out the questions of school, and there was developed the term slicker. "Got tobacco?" whispered Rahel one night, putting his head inside the door 5 minutes after lights. "Sure. I'm coming in." "Take a couple of pillows and lie in the window seat, why don't you?" Amory sat up in bed and lit a cigarette, while Rahel settled for a conversation. Rahel's favorite subject was the respective futures of the sixth form, and Amory never tired of outlining them for his benefit. Ted Converse? That's easy. He'll fail his exams, tutor all summer in Harstrom's, get into chef with about 4 conditions, and flunk out in the middle of freshman year. Then he'll go back west and raise hell for a year or so. Finally his father will make him go into the paint business. He'll marry and have 4 sons, all boneheads. He'll always think St. Regis spoiled him, so he'll send his sons to day school in Portland. He'll die of locomotor ataxia when he's 41, and his wife will give a baptizing stand or whatever you call it to the Presbyterian Church, with his name on it. Hold up, Amory. That's too darn gloomy. How about yourself? I'm in a superior class. You are too. We're philosophers. I'm not. Sure you are. You've got a darn good head on you. But Amory knew that nothing in the abstract, no theory or generality, ever moved Rahel until he stubbed his toe upon the concrete minutiae of it. "Haven't," insisted Rahel. "I let people impose on me here, and don't get anything out of it. I'm the prey of my friends, damn it. Do their lessons, get 'em out of trouble, pay 'em stupid summer visits, and always entertain their kid sisters. keep my temper when they get selfish, and then they think they pay me back by voting for me, and telling me I'm the big man of St. Regis. I want to get where everybody does their own work, and I can tell people where to go. I'm tired of being nice to every poor fish in school." "You're not a slicker," said Amory suddenly. "A what?" "A slicker." "What the devil's that?" "Well, it's something that there's a lot of them. You're not one, and neither am I, though I am more than you are." "Who is one? What makes you one?" Amory considered. Why, I suppose that the sign of it is when a fellow slicks his hair back with water." "Like Carstairs?" "Yes, sure. He's a slicker." They spent 2 evenings getting an exact definition. The slicker was good-looking or clean-looking. He had brains, social brains, that is, and he used all means on the broad path of honesty to get ahead, be popular, admired, and never in trouble. He dressed well, was particularly neat in appearance, and derived his name from the fact that his hair was inevitably worn short, soaked in water or tonic, parted in the middle, and slicked back as the current of fashion dictated. The slickers of that year had adopted tortoiseshell spectacles as badges of their slickerhood, and this made them so easy to recognize that Amory and Rahel never missed one. The slicker seemed distributed through school, always a little wiser and shrewder than his contemporaries, managing some team or other, and keeping his cleverness carefully concealed. Amory found the slicker a most valuable classification until his junior year in college, when the outline became so blurred and indeterminate that it had to be subdivided many times, and became only a quality. Amory's secret ideal had all the slicker qualifications, but, in addition, courage and tremendous brains and talent. Also Amory conceded him a bizarre streak that was quite irreconcilable to the slicker proper. This was the first real break from the hypocrisy of school tradition. The slicker was a definite element of success, differing intrinsically from the prep school big man. The slicker. 1. Clever sense of social values. 2. Dresses well. Pretends that dress is superficial, but knows that it isn't. 3. Goes into such activities as he can shine in. 4. Gets to college and is, in a worldly way, successful. 5. Hair slicked. The big man. 1. Inclined to stupidity and unconscious of social values. 2. Thinks dress is superficial and is inclined to be careless about it. 3. Goes out for everything from a sense of duty. 4. Gets to college and has a problematical future, feels lost without a circle, and always says that school days were happiest after all, goes back to school and makes speeches about what St. Regis boys are doing. 5. Hair not slicked. Amory had decided definitely on Princeton, even though he would be the only boy entering that year from St. Regis. Yale had a romance and glamour from the tales of Minneapolis, and St. Regis men who had been tapped for Skull and Bones, but Princeton drew him most, with its atmosphere of bright colors and its alluring reputation as the pleasantest country club in America. Dwarfed by the menacing college exams, Amory's school days drifted into the past. Years afterward, when he went back to St. Regis, he seemed to have forgotten the successes of sixth form year, and to be able to picture himself only as the unadjustable boy who had hurried down corridors, jeered at by his rabid contemporaries, mad with common sense. End of This Side of Paradise, Book 1, The Romantic Egotist. Chapter 1, Amory, Son of Beatrice, by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Read by Faith Pack.
Treasure Island, Chapter 1, The Old Sea Dog at the Admiral Benbow, by Robert Louis Stevenson. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Rachel. Squire Trelawney, Dr. Livesey, and the rest of these gentlemen, having asked me to write down the whole particulars about Treasure Island, from the beginning to the end, keeping nothing back but the bearings of the island, and that only because there is still treasure not yet lifted, I take up my pen, in the year of grace 17 something, and go back to the time when my father kept the Admiral Benbow Inn, and the brown old seaman with the sabre cut first took up his lodging under our roof. I remember him as if it were yesterday, as he came plodding to the inn door, his sea chest following behind him in a hand-barrow, a tall, strong, heavy, nut-brown man, his tarry pigtail falling over the shoulder of his soiled blue coat, his hands ragged and scarred, with black broken nails, and the sabre cut across one cheek, a dirty livid white. I remember him looking round the cover, and whistling to himself as he did so, and then breaking out in that old sea-song that he sang so often afterwards. 15 men on the dead man's chest, yo-ho-ho, and a bottle of rum, in the high old tottering voice that seemed to have been tuned and broken at the capstan bars. Then he rapped on the door with a bit of stick like a handspike that he carried, and when my father appeared, called roughly for a glass of rum. This, when it was brought to him, he drank slowly, like a connoisseur, lingering on the taste, and still looking about him at the cliffs and up at our signboard. "This is a handy cove," says he at length, "and a pleasant city-added grog-shop. Much company, mate?" My father told him no, very little company, the more was the pity. "Well then," said he, "this is the berth for me. Here you, matey," he cried to the man who trundled the barrow, "bring up alongside and help up my chest. I'll stay here a bit," he continued. "I'm a plain man, rum and bacon and eggs is what I want, and that head up there for to watch ships off. What you mought call me? You mought call me captain. Oh, I see what you're at. There," and he threw down 3 or 4 gold pieces on the threshold. "You can tell me when I've worked through that," says he, looking fierce as a commander. And indeed, bad as his clothes were, and coarsely as he spoke, he had none of the appearance of a man who sailed before the mast, but seemed like a mate or skipper accustomed to be obeyed or to strike. The man who came with the barrow told us the mail had set him down the morning before at the Royal George, that he had inquired what inns there were along the coast, and hearing ours well spoken of, I suppose, and described as lonely, had chosen it from the others for his place of residence. And that was all we could learn of our guest. He was a very silent man by custom. All day he hung round the cove or upon the cliffs with a brass telescope. All evening he sat in a corner of the parlour next the fire, and drank rum and water very strong. Mostly he would not speak when spoken to, only look up sudden and fierce and blow through his nose like a foghorn, and we and the people who came about our house soon learned to let him be. Every day when he came back from his stroll he would ask if any seafaring men had gone by along the road. At first we thought it was the want of company of his own kind that made him ask this question, but at last we began to see that he was desirous to avoid them. When a seaman did put up at the Admiral Benbow, and now and then some did, making by the coast road for Bristol, he would look in at him through the curtained door before he entered the parlour, and he was always sure to be as silent as a mouse when any such was present. For me, at least, there was no secret about the matter, for I was, in a way, a sharer in his alarms. He had taken me aside one day and promised me a silver 4penny of the first of every month if I would only keep my weather eye open for a seafaring man with one leg, and let him know the moment he appeared. Often enough, when the first of the month came round and I applied to him for my wage, he would only blow through his nose at me and stare me down, but before the week was out he was sure to think better of it, bringing me my 4penny piece, and repeat his orders to look out for the seafaring man with one leg. How that personage haunted my dreams I need scarcely tell you. On stormy nights, when the wind shook the 4 corners of the house, and the surf roared along the cove and up the cliffs, I would see him in 1,000 forms, and with 1,000 diabolical expressions. Now the leg would be cut off at the knee, now at the hip, now he was a monstrous kind of a creature, who had never had but the one leg, and that in the middle of his body. To see him leap and run and pursue me over hedge and ditch was the worst of nightmares. And altogether I paid pretty dear for my monthly 4penny piece, in the shape of these abominable fancies. But though I was so terrified by the idea of the seafaring man with one leg, I was far less afraid of the captain himself than anybody else who saw him. There were nights when he took a deal more rum and water than his head would carry, and then would sometimes sit and sing his wicked old wild sea songs, minding nobody, but sometimes he would call for glasses round, and force all the trembling company to listen to his stories, or bear a chorus to his singing. Often I have heard the house shaking with "Yo ho ho" and a bottle of rum, all the neighbours joining in for dear life with the fear of death upon them, and each singing louder than the other to avoid remark. For in these fits he was the most overriding companion ever known. He would slap his hand on the table for silence all round. He would fly up in a passion of anger at a question, or sometimes because none was put, and so he judged the company was not following his story. Nor would he allow anyone to leave the inn till he had drunk himself sleepy and reeled off to bed. His stories were what frightened people worst of all. Dreadful stories they were, about hanging and walking the plank, and storms at sea, and the dry Tortugas, and wild deeds in places on the Spanish Main. By his own account he must have lived his life among some of the wickedest men that God ever allowed upon the sea, and the language in which he told these stories shocked our plain country people almost as much as the crimes that he described. My father was always saying that the inn would be ruined, for people would soon cease coming there to be tyrannized over and put down, and sent shivering to their beds, but I really believe his presence did us good. People were frightened at the time, but on looking back they rather liked it. It was a fine excitement in a quiet country life, and there was even a party of the younger men who pretended to admire him, calling him a true sea dog and a real old salt, and such like names, and saying there was the sort of man that made England terrible at sea. In one way, indeed, he bade fair to ruin us, for he kept on staying week after week, and at last month after month, so that all the money had been long exhausted, and still my father never plucked up the heart to insist on having more. If ever he mentioned it, the captain blew through his nose so loudly that you might say he roared, and scared my poor father out of the room. I have seen him wringing his hands after such a rebuff, and I am sure the annoyance and the terror he lived in must have greatly hastened his early and unhappy death. All the time he lived with us the captain made no change whatever in his dress, but to buy some stockings from a hawker. One of the cocks of his hat having fallen down, he let it hang from that day forth, though it was a great annoyance when it blew. I remember the appearance of his coat, which he patched himself upstairs in his room, and which before the end was nothing but patches. He never wrote or received a letter, and he never spoke with any but the neighbours, and with these, for the most part, only when drunk on rum. The great sea chest none of us had ever seen him open. He was only once crossed, and that was towards the end, when my poor father was far gone in a decline that took him off. Dr. Livesey came late one afternoon to see the patient, took a bit of dinner from my mother, and went into the parlour to smoke a pipe until his horse should come down from the hamlet, for we had no stabling at the old Benbow. I followed him in, and I remember observing the contrast the neat bright doctor, with his powder as white as snow, and his bright black eyes and pleasant manners, made with the coltish country folk, and above all with that filthy, heavy, bleared scarecrow of a pirate of ours, sitting, far gone in rum, with his arms on the table. Suddenly he, the captain that is, began to pipe up his eternal song. 15 men on the dead man's chest, yo ho ho, and a bottle of rum. Drink and the devil had done for the rest, yo ho ho, and a bottle of rum. At first I supposed the dead man's chest to be that identical big box of his upstairs in the front room, and the thought had been mingled in my nightmares with that of the one-legged seafaring man. But by this time we had all long ceased to pay any particular notice to the song. It was new that night to nobody but Dr. Livesey, and on him I observed it did not produce an agreeable effect, for he looked up for a moment quite angrily before he went on with his talk to old Taylor the gardener on a new cure for the rheumatics. In the meantime the captain gradually brightened up at his own music, and at last flapped his hand upon the table before him in a way we all knew to mean silence. The voices stopped at once, all but Dr. Livesey's. He went on as before, speaking clear and kind, and drawing briskly at his pipe between every word or two. The captain glared at him for a while, flapped his hand again, glared still harder, and at last broke out with a villainous low oath. Silence there between decks. "Were you addressing me, sir?" says the doctor. and when the ruffian had told him with another oath that this was so, "I have only one thing to say to you, sir," replies the doctor, "that if you keep on drinking rum, the world will soon be quit of a very dirty scoundrel." The old fellow's fury was awful. He sprang to his feet, drew and opened a sailor's clasp knife, and balancing it open on the palm of his hand, threatened to pin the doctor to the wall. The doctor never so much as moved. He spoke to him as before, over his shoulder and in the same tone of voice, rather high, so that all the room might hear, but perfectly calm and steady. "If you do not put that knife this instant in your pocket, I promise upon my honour you shall hang at the next assizes." Then followed a battle of looks between them, but the captain soon knuckled under, put up his weapon, and resumed his seat, grumbling like a beaten dog. "And now, sir," continued the doctor, "since I now know there's such a fellow in my district, you may count I'll have an eye upon you day and night. I'm not a doctor only, I'm a magistrate, and if I catch a breath of complaint against you, if it's only for a piece of incivility like tonight's, I'll take effectual means to have you hunted down and routed out of this. Let that suffice." Soon after, Dr. Livesey's horse came to the door, and he rode away, but the captain held his peace that evening, and for many evenings to come. End of Treasure Island, Chapter 1, The Old Sea Dog at the Admiral Benbow, by Robert Louis Stevenson.
"2 Years Before the Mast", Chapter 1, by Richard Henry Dana. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Bruce Kachuk. The 14th of August was the day fixed upon for the sailing of the brig Pilgrim on her voyage from Boston round Cape Horn to the western coast of North America. As she was to get under way early in the afternoon, I made my appearance on board at 12 o'clock, in full sea rig, with my chest containing an outfit for a 2 or 3 years' voyage, which I had undertaken from a determination to cure, if possible, by an entire change of life, and by a long absence from books, with a plenty of hard work, plain food, and open air, a weakness of the eyes, which had obliged me to give up my studies, and which no medical aid seemed likely to remedy. The change from the tight frock coat, silk cap, and kid gloves of an undergraduate at Harvard to the loose duck trousers, checked shirt, and tarpaulin hat of a sailor, though somewhat of a transformation, was soon made, and I supposed that I should pass very well for a jack-tar. But it is impossible to deceive the practised eye in these matters, and while I thought myself to be looking as salt as Neptune himself, I was, no doubt, known for a landsman by every one on board as soon as I hove in sight. A sailor has a peculiar cut to his clothes, and a way of wearing them which a green hand can never get. The trousers tight round the hips, and thence hanging long and loose round the feet, a superabundance of checked shirt, a low-crowned, well-varnished black hat worn on the back of the head, with half a fathom of black ribbon hanging over the left eye, and a slip-tie to the black silk neckerchief, with sundry other minutiae, are signs, the want of which betrays the beginner at once. Besides the points in my dress, which were out of the way, doubtless my complexion and hands were quite enough to distinguish me from the regular sort, who, with a sunburnt cheek, wide step, and rolling gait, swings his bronzed and toughened hands athwartships, half opened, as though just ready to grasp a rope. With all my imperfections on my head, I joined the crew, and we hauled out into the stream, and came to anchor for the night. The next day we were employed in preparation for sea, reeving, studding sail gear, crossing royal yards, putting on chafing gear, and taking on board our powder. On the following night I stood my first watch. I remained awake nearly all the first part of the night, from fear that I might not hear when I was called, and when I went on deck, so great were my ideas of the importance of my trust, that I walked regularly fore and aft the whole length of the vessel, looking out over the bows and taffrail at each turn, and was not a little surprised at the coolness of the old seaman whom I called to take my place, in stowing himself snugly away under the longboat for a nap. That was a sufficient lookout, he thought, for a fine night at anchor in a safe harbour. The next morning was Saturday, and, a breeze having sprung up from the southward, we took a pilot on board, hove up our anchor, and began beating down the bay. I took leave of those of my friends who came to see me off, and had barely opportunity for a last look at the city and well-known objects, as no time is allowed on board ship for sentiment. As we drew down into the lower harbour, we found the wind ahead in the bay, and were obliged to come to anchor in the roads. We remained there through the day and a part of the night. My watch began at 11 o'clock at night, and I received orders to call the captain if the wind came out from the westward. About midnight the wind became fair, and, having summoned the captain, I was ordered to call all hands. How I accomplished this I do not know, but I am quite sure that I did not give the true hoarse boatswain call of "All hands! Up anchor! Ahoy!" In a short time every one was in motion, the sails loosed, the yards braced, and we began to heave up the anchor, which was our last hold upon Yankee land. I could take but small part in these preparations. My little knowledge of a vessel was all at fault. Unintelligible orders were so rapidly given, and so immediately executed. There was such a hurrying about, and such an intermingling of strange cries and stranger actions, that I was completely bewildered. There is not so helpless and pitiable an object in the world as a landsman beginning a sailor's life. At length those peculiar, long-drawn sounds, which denote that the crew are heaving at the windlass, began, and in a few minutes we were under way. The noise of the water thrown from the bows was heard. The vessel leaned over from the damp night breeze and rolled with the heavy groundswell, and we had actually begun our long, long journey. This was literally bidding good night to my native land. End of 2 Years Before the Mast, Chapter 1, by Richard Henry Dana.
Genesis chapter 1 of the World English Bible British edition. This is the Librivox calling. All Librivox coins are in the public domain. For more information on the frontier, visit librivox.org. We're coined by Glenn O'Brien. www.glennobrien.net. The first book of Moses, commonly called Genesis. Chapter 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and empty. Darkness was on the surface of the deep, and God's Spirit was hovering over the surface of the waters. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw the light, and saw that it was good. God divided the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. There was evening and there was morning, the first day. God said, "Let there be an expanse in the middle of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." God made the expanse, and divided the waters which are under the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse. And it was so. God called the expanse sky. There was evening and there was morning, a second day. God said, "Let the waters under the sky be gathered together to one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas. God saw that it was good. God said, "Let the earth yield grass, earth-bearing seeds, and trees bearing fruit out of their kind, with the seeds in it on the earth." And it was so. The earth yielded grass, earth-bearing seed out of their kind, and trees bearing fruit with their seeds in it out of their kind. And God saw that it was good. There was evening and there was morning, a third day. God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs to mark seasons, days, and years, and let them be for lights in the expanse of the sky to give light on the earth. And it was so. God made the two great lights, the greater light toward the day, and the less light toward the night. He also made the stars. God set them in the expanse of the sky to give light to the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. God saw that it was good. There was evening, and there was morning, a fourth day. God said, let the world abound with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth in the open expanse of the sky. God created the large sea creatures, and every living creature that moves, with which the world swarmed, after their kind, and every winged bird after its kind. God saw that it was good. God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. There was evening and there was morning, a fifth day. God said, let the earth produce living creatures out of their kind, livestock, creeping things, and animals of the earth out of their kind. And it was so. God made the animals of the earth out of their kind, and the livestock out of their kind, and everything that creeps on the ground out of its kind. God saw that it was good. God said, let's make man in our image after our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. God created man in his own image. In God's image he created him, man and female he created them. God blessed them. God said to them, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. God said, behold, I have given you every herb-yielding seed which is on the surface of all the earth, and every tree which bears fruit-yielding seed. It will be your food. To every animal of the earth, and to every bird of the sky, and to everything that creeps on the earth in which there is life, I have given every green herb for food. And it was so. God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. There was evening and there was morning, a sixth day. End of Genesis chapter 1 of the World English Bible British edition.